I don't think anyone has a stable childhood. There's lots of highs and lows which happen, and all of these experiences make us who we are today. But as I'm approaching 30, I feel that I want to kind of get more from life. I'm happy where I am, but I know that there's more.
I don't look at it as shutting it out. I feel like it's just taking action to relieve any suffering that we may be feeling in the moment. It's self-compassion, isn't it?
22, 23. So being that young and doing CPR and then a patient dying in front of you is just very, very difficult kind of circumstances to be. And there was none of that. I got silent treatment for like 2 weeks after that, which made me feel like I'd done something.
Thank you for doing this. This is so exciting that you've agreed to come onto the podcast. I listened to your second episode first, the one with your husband with the regime, which was fantastic. I loved it. Having done some podcast episodes with my wife, I resonated on a lot of things that you guys were talking about. And I'm kind of nearly towards the end of the one that you did with your father, with your dad, which was also fascinating. So there's lots I want to talk to you about, but I want to get straight into just going back a little bit, because I always like to start going back a little bit, because it gives not just me but anyone else that's listening, just gives them a better understanding of where you're coming from, what your what your life's been like. So tell me, what was it like for you growing up? I know that's a real big open question to start off with, but let's just start there. What was it like for you?
So first of all, thank you for inviting me on. I love being able to tell my story as a podcast host. I don't get that opportunity often. So I think it's a really nice opportunity for me to just start sharing parts of my story. So I think when I think about my beginnings, I have to go a bit further rather than the point of birth. We need to think beyond kind of what happened before that. So thinking about my parents, my dad was born in Uganda and moved to the UK when he was 11. My mum was born in India and came to the UK when she got married, which was age 23. So they both had very different upbringings and different things that were happening in their lives. Then I'm one of three children. So I've got an older sister and a younger sister. So I'm the middle child, and you can make what you want of that, whether I've got the middle child syndrome as we go through the conversation. And when I kind of think about my childhood and my upbringing, I would probably say it was quite stable. And I get this when I speak to my patients. So when I tell them, tell me about your life, and they'll be like, childhood was pretty normal. It was just stable. But actually, I don't think anyone has a stable childhood. There's lots of highs and lows which happen, and all of these experiences make us who we are today. So in terms of kind of the home setup, my mum was a stay-at-home mum. My dad was the main breadwinner for the family. He went through lots of different kind of phases of work, but he was pretty much self-employed from the beginning. And now he's a high-performance coach, and he's been doing that for about 35 years. So all of that kind of personal development, touching on spirituality was embedded into my upbringing from a young age. And then from my mom's side and my dad's side, there was the culture and the religious side, and again, spirituality coming into that, because it's really hard to pick those things apart. So in terms of being brought up with the Hindu culture and Indian culture around me, that meant that I was exposed to kind of Indian arts and culture. So I went to dance classes from a young age, from like age 4. I was going to dance classes every weekend. So I'd be dancing on the weekends and then school in the weekdays. And so that really kind of enriched my childhood and upbringing. There was loads of things I learned from my dance classes and loads of things I learned from going to school, and they kind of came together and made me who I was growing up. And then in terms of kind of my education side of things, obviously, like most Indian parents, my parents pushed me to do as well as I could academically. Luckily, they didn't put all my self-worth on that. So there was never ever a comparison between me and my sisters, which was good. We were different academically, and we were different in our strengths and weaknesses. I was particularly good at memory and recall, so that worked in my favor with academics. So I got good grades. So when it got to kind of the point where I had to make a decision about my career, which happens at the age of 15, 16. I decided at that time, well, you've got good GCSE grades, you're doing better than your peers, and the teachers are saying you need to make something of your life. So I thought, okay, I need to apply myself in the best way possible. Obviously, I turned to my parents for inspiration. So my dad was doing something to help people live their best version of themselves. My mum at that point had gone back into work, and she was running a nursery. So it was all about education and enriching children. So I kind of wanted to kind of help society and serve society. So I knew that was always going to be part of my career, but I didn't know how I was going to get there. And we'll talk a little bit about how I decided to go into medicine, things like financial security, and why I chose to go down the route where I had a boss and an employer rather than being self-employed, which is basically the rest of my family. So I'm a bit of a black sheep in that context. But I decided medicine was the route I wanted to go down. And even then, there was ups and downs in deciding that was what I wanted to do. And then I've kind of progressed through my training. I chose psychiatry, which is being a specialist within mental health. So that's where my kind of education career path took me. In terms of relationships, I kind of met my husband at university in my first year of university. We had our highs and lows, and then it turned into a relationship that we wanted to take further, and we got married 2.5 years ago, and things are really kind of amazing in that part of my life. But as I'm approaching 30, I feel that I want to kind of get more from life. I'm happy where I am, but I know that there's more satisfaction I can get and more fulfillment I can get. I feel like I've got to a place where I'm just comfortable, I'm just coasting. But where I like to be is that kind of level of optimal discomfort where you still feel like you're getting challenged. And I don't feel like I'm doing that right now. So that's kind of where I am, crossroads in my life right now. My husband's also making lots of decisions about his career and where he wants to go. So we're thinking about it together in a very intentional way. And maybe towards kind of the end of the podcast where it will fit in nicely, I can talk about, well, this was where I started. How have I turned that into action? So that's kind of like a brief summary of my background, where I'm coming from and where I hope to be going.
You said quite a few things there, which I just want to pick up on a couple of points. You mentioned, I've just got it written down here, spiritual and religious family. What did that look like to you when you were growing up, and what does that mean to you now? I'm interested to see sort of what your journey's been like with spirituality and religion.
Yeah. So I think for most children that grow up with a Hindu background, they will go to all the festivals, they will go to the mandir, the temple, and get involved in this stuff. So that's very much from a young age. I was doing the rituals. We had a mandir in the house. And there wasn't really much choice about whether you wanted to be involved with that with a young age. And then as I grew up, I started questioning things, but in a very kind of a curiosity kind of way, rather than I don't want to do this. And I think that's where my parents used spirituality to try to understand and explore things a little bit more. Because I'd be like, why are we doing this? Why is it relevant? Why do I have to get this milk and put it on that? Why are we doing this? It makes no sense. And they tried to explain it using spirituality. So it allowed me to ask the questions and to explore it through my own kind of lens. And then my dad used to do lots of reading as part of his job and personal development. So then I used to see how actually both those things connected. Spirituality, religion, and culture was very much what people were talking about when they're thinking about personal development, finding your purpose, finding your why. When you think about that, it's set in Hindu culture. Finding your purpose is dharma. So it came together, and it helped those two ideas come together. But I still think that I went along with things just because I had to for a while. And then I've been kind of exploring it even more so in the last 2 to 3 years. And for me, having belief that there is something bigger than just myself makes the world make sense more than there isn't anything. And it's what I want to, when I have children, that's the kind of way I want to do it as well. This is the religion and this is the rituals that we do, and I want you to question them. And then I want to find out more about them. But then also separating the culture from religion, because there are a lot of things that are set in stone, like things like you can't go to the temple when you're on your period. Now, that's not anything to do with spirituality. It's got nothing to do with religion, and it's got nothing to do with being impure. So when I questioned that, my mom was like, actually, you're right. you can do whatever you want when you're on a period. So it's not about once your parents give you an answer, not about accepting everything, still having the freedom to question things and seeing what conclusions you come to. And that's very much been my journey in a nutshell. I feel like there's loads. I could do a whole podcast about religion and spirituality, but that's a little snippet of it.
Yeah, I love what you said there about the difference between culture and religion. You know, there's different things that you do. You mentioned, you know, going to the temple when you're in your period. You know, I can think of things like, you know, you obviously we learn to eat with our hands, and I don't know if this was something you did, but you're not allowed to eat with your left hand because that's the hand that you wipe your bottom with when you go to the toilet, right? And these were the sorts of things that I also grew up with, but and I did question them. It was a different time for me as well, and you know, I just got that this is just because, you know. So my experience with these cultural traditions and religion has been a little bit different. So it's quite refreshing to hear from your side of things that when you challenge things, there was a you made your parents stop and think actually, do you know what, why is this like that? So I think that fosters a very healthy relationship with it, as opposed to you know, I'll be honest, I grew up kind of rebelling against it a little bit because I felt like perhaps it was pushed onto me, which you kind of mentioned. We all kind of end up doing the things that our parents do anyway, but without much explanation. And also at the time for me, you know, when I was growing up, there was no one else at school who was like me. So we were the only ones doing things that way. And, you know, it goes back to your point, which I've written down here as well, about, you know, you felt like you could be yourself at home and not at school. Whereas for me, it was definitely the other way around. I felt like I could be myself when I was at school because I could just, you know, be free and talk about the things I wanted to talk about and do the things I wanted to do. Whereas when I was at home, there was some confinements, there was laws, there was restrictions, there was rules, and I didn't really confine to those. So what was it about? What was it that made you feel that you could be your genuine self at home? I mean, what do you think was a part of that? What made that happen?
I think I'll look at it the other way. It was more, what was that outside of home that I couldn't be myself? And really looking at it, there was always this sense of wanting to fit in. At home, I didn't have to do anything to prove myself. But when I went outside and when I was in school, I think I probably started realizing, oh, actually, I'm different. The color of my skin is different. My values are different. My religious beliefs are different. I can probably remember around like year 2 or year 3, I started noticing there was a difference. And that's when I just separated the two things. And I was who I wanted to be at home, and I would do all the things that were important to me, like my dancing. And then at school, I would be the person I needed to be to fit in, so you can have friends and just kind of blend in with everyone. That's what it was, very much about blending. And it's taken me all these years to realize I was doing that. For example, with my dancing, there wasn't anything to be ashamed of that I was doing Indian classical dancing, but it was different. And just that being different, I didn't want to be different. I just wanted to be the same as everyone else. So on weekends, I'd be dancing. I would be going on tours with the dance company I was training with. I'd go and do competitions. And I remember once I did a competition and I came second in a national competition. And then when I went to school on Monday morning, it was just normal. There was just a total separation of it. Like usually if you're being your authentic self, you could come back and you can tell your friends about it and be excited. And everyone's like, how's your weekend? Yeah, it was fine. Just a quiet one, chilled, did nothing. So there was a part of me that just wanted to just be normal. And what that meant was shying away from my true self, not celebrating the differences about myself. But now I'm coming to find that actually that's what makes me me, and I should be proud about it. I'm slowly starting to come into my authentic self, but that's taken some time. And I think it all comes down to shame. And it's a strong word to use, but it is, and it's weird because it's, what is it? Shame about my religion, my culture, my identity, but it really was. And no, I don't think anyone made me feel that way. I don't know. I've still got to do some more deeper digging to find out, where did this come from?
Yeah, well, you just took the words out of my mouth, because one of my questions was going to be, just to follow up on that, was there a level of embarrassment? And I guess you used the word shame, and embarrassment.
Yeah.
It can be used very similarly. And I certainly felt that myself, is that if I went to a wedding, or if I, Raksha Bandhan, you go to school with your rakris on, the next day, and it was like, oh, what's that on your wrist? And people would. I feel now, looking back, I think people may have been genuinely interested, because it was different. It was like, oh, what's Sunjay wearing these things on his wrist for? There was an element, why are you wearing girly jewelry and all this stuff? There's the mocking, but there was a genuine interest. But for me, it was like, oh my God, people are looking at me because I'm different, and no one else is doing these things. And I was embarrassed. There was shame there, and I think it comes from, again, not speaking for you, but for me, it came from what you just said earlier. It was about wanting to fit in. And I didn't want to be the odd one out. I didn't want to be the one that people were looking at, even if there might have been an element of, hey, I'm genuinely interested in what, that you're different, right? It's there's a split crowd there. You're going to get a mixture of both. But I saw it as, don't look at me. I'm just a normal. I'm just like everyone else. When of course we weren't, and it's difficult because. It's interesting to see that you had a very similar experience to me in that, because we grew up in slightly different times, but we had a very similar experience, having been the children of immigrants to this country. And I had this conversation recently with my dad, in that he's told me a lot about his story growing up and what it was like in Africa and in Uganda where he was, and they had a hard time. And you would know this from I guess from your work as in psychiatry, that everyone's experience on this planet is different, and everyone's experience is valid. And you may listen to a story and you think, well, that sounds really tough. It must have been a really hard time. That doesn't make that person's story hold any more weight or gravitas when it comes to pain, when it comes to trauma, any of those things, as someone else. So, I heard a wonderful example the other day on a podcast, which was, you ask a child who's 3, they lived for 3 years, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to them? And it might have been that they broke a toy, right? Or their favorite toy, they lost their favorite teddy. And that could be the most traumatic and the most significant thing that's happened to them in their life, that they haven't really enjoyed that experience. And you ask someone that's 40, they're going to have a completely different answer. And that per 40-year-old might say, I lost someone close to me, I went through this, whatever it is, right? But that doesn't make that person's pain any worse than the 3 or 4-year-old. It's just different. And our experience growing up as children of immigrants, I kind of had to explain to my dad that just imagine what it would have been like for me. And this is not, and again, I have to stress this with my parents, because they always feel like I'm attacking them, whereas I'm not. I'm really just coming from a genuine place of curiosity and saying, look, what do you think it was like for someone coming into this country who went to school? Everyone's different, everyone's speaking a different language, right? Because I'm guessing your mother tongue is Gujarati, just like mine is, and everyone's speaking a different language, and everyone's eating different foods, and there was this "who am I?" question that I probably still have to this day, but I remember when I was growing up, it was, who am I? Am I Indian? Am I Asian? Am I British? Am I English? What am I? And I think that identity crisis is something that I think a lot of people do face, and it is, you're right. It's nothing to be ashamed of, but I think it takes some time to get to a place to be able to reflect back and think of it that way. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, 100%. We can continue to ignore it, but you have to own it, and you have to go deeper and name those feelings and name those situations. If I thought about it, if I just thought deeply about it, I could probably find some kind of embarrassing instance that would have happened that made me feel that way. And then in my head, I made everything into, I can't do that because it's going to make me feel embarrassed again. I want to hide away from ever feeling that way. And like you said, it could have been something really small, but in my child's brain, it was traumatic enough for me to want to kind of hide away from my culture. I give one small example. I used to always be like, if my mom picked me up from school and she was giving one of my friends a lift, I used to hate it if she was listening to an Indian radio station, simple things like that. And then I'd be with one of my other friends and they'd be listening to I don't know, Capital, and their mom would be singing along with the songs. And I'd be like, oh, why couldn't my mom just know those songs and be up to date with pop culture? Simple things like that, because I just felt if they knew that, then I could fit in. But thinking back, what a silly little thing to wish for. But in my child's brain and my child's experience, that's what made me feel like if I had that, then I would feel like comfortable and I could relax. But again, I was just wanting to be someone else, to kind of just go under the radar, not be seen.
Yeah, it's, we are a product of our environment, and
Yeah.
I've had that same thought in my head. And when it comes to music, when it comes to sport, I used to love going to play football and things. And everyone's dads would come and watch them play. And my dad was working, and I'm not blaming my dad for not being there. He was being the best parent he could by working 15 hours a day just so we could have food on our table. So, but I remember at the time thinking, why is my dad not here cheering me on? And why is my dad not into football and taking me to football on the weekends? Because that's what people are around me. And yeah, you're right. It does come from that level of embarrassment. And it is something silly, but again, it just comes back to fitting in. So it's fascinating. Again, it's just interesting to hear that story from someone else. And I'm sure there's lots of people listening who are resonating with that. I want to kind of move forward a little bit and kind of talk about. You mentioned. Doing things that you said, I've kind of done things that society maybe expects of me, or this image of life that society puts upon us, whether that's through your parents or through education or through the world in general. What was it that drove you towards doing psychiatry? Because you mentioned, I guess all parents want their kids to do well. All parents want their kids to educate themselves. I feel like there's I want to be careful how I say this, but I feel like in the Asian culture, there's a very strong ethic behind that because of the struggles that our parents have gone through. From my parents, it was like, look, we struggled a lot to come to this country, to provide you with a lot. We had to go through a lot of struggle. And in order for you to not go through the same level of struggle, it's important that you get an education so that you have options when you are older to be able to look after yourself. So I kind of want to get a picture of what was that like for you and what kind of drove you towards this area of psychiatry.
Yeah. So actually, like I said, my parents were quite open-minded. My dad was self-employed from the age of 30. So he definitely took a different path and took a big risk. Being from that immigrant background, he wanted to be a social worker. But then when he started doing the training, he was like, this is totally against my values. I cannot do this. And then just started being a youth worker for Barnardo's and slowly made his way up. Then got into human resources consulting. So he had like a very windy route to get to where he did. So he had the same open-mindedness for us. He was never kind of, although he said, yes, I think it was more my mom that said, work hard, do well at school. And they always provided us with everything we needed to be successful. And then they kind of let us just choose what we wanted to do with our lives. But of course, I think that immigrant mindset was still there for them because they didn't want us to struggle. So when I did my GCSEs, that's when I realized, I was like, oh, actually, I get these things a little bit easier. Being academic is probably one of my strengths. Until that stage, I didn't really see it as one of my strengths. I would kind of just carry on. And I guess until there's something like GCSEs where you get kind of compared to the rest of your colleagues, you don't know how good you're doing. So at that point, it was kind of a turning point for me to think, okay, I want to use my grades to good use. So I kind of started going through the careers. My mom was like, well, you like maths. I used to love maths. She was like, why don't you be an accountant? I was like, yeah, sounds a bit boring. And she's like, why don't you do law? I was like, yeah, maybe. And then someone mentioned do medicine, and I don't have, and there's no one in my family that's done medicine in our extended family. I think we have to go quite wide to find someone that we have a relationship that has done medicine. So it was totally new to me. And my first initial reaction was like, I don't want to do that because it's an Asian stereotype. That was literally my response to being, I was like, I don't want to fit into that because everyone will think just because you're Indian, that's why you're doing medicine. So I was like, I don't want to fit into that. And then the more I started to explore, I sort of totally rejected it. And then I kind of, people at school, teachers were suggesting maybe you should think about that. And then I realized, actually, even though it is the stereotype, being Indian is not enough to get into medicine. You actually have to work really hard. And not every Indian becomes a doctor because it's not possible to do that. It's not just that is not the entry criteria. And it's just not having pushy parents. That's not what gets you in. You actually have to have the grades and work hard. And I thought, okay, it actually does fit with what I want to do. I want to help people. So maybe I should give this path a go. And my parents said, do you know what? Give it a go. And if it's not what you expect it to be, just leave it and rethink. So there was always that kind of support from them at the end of every year. So it was a 5-year degree that I did, and at the end of every year we'd have exams, and that's where I'd kind of really buckle down and work really hard. And Mom would see me and she'd be like, do you know what, if this is too stressful, just forget it, just drop out and we can rethink about it, have some time off and you can do something. I was like, no, Mom, I enjoy this, I really, really do. So I'd be persuading her to be like, don't give up on me, I can do this. But taking it one step back, before I decided I wanted to do medicine, it was between two things for me. I was either going to do medicine or I was going to do psychology at university. Psychology because I felt like it fit most with what my dad did, but it was like a bit more scientific. And I liked the sciences. And also my sister had just done a degree in psychology as well. So it's normal just to feel comfortable and follow that route. But at that point, I didn't ever think, oh, actually, let me do medicine because I can do psychology within that by doing psychiatry. I hadn't even heard of psychiatry. I didn't really know where it fit into the system. I kind of made psychology and psychiatry synonymous, and I thought, oh, you do something with psychology and you get there. And then in my 4th year of medicine, that's when we do our placement. And up till that point, I had enjoyed everything that I did. I liked a bit of A&E, I liked a bit of general practice. And because I liked a little bit of every area of medicine, I thought general practice is the way for me. I want to be a family doctor. I want to see people of all ages. I want to follow the family through. That is for me. And then I did psychiatry and my mind was absolutely blown. I was like, wow, this is amazing. I get to see the patient as a whole. I get to ask them about their social life, about their upbringing, about their childhood, about what their dreams and goals are. And I get to help them with medication. I get to talk to them and help them with psychological therapies. And I get to support them with the social side of things as well. So at that point, I got really kind of into psychiatry and I could see myself being a psychiatrist. And to be honest, I haven't looked back since then. So again, it happened almost by accident because I hadn't thought about it. And then I got a good placement in my 4th year, but it wasn't ever an intentional thing. But when I saw the patients I'd be working with and find out more about it, all the stars aligned and I thought, this is for me. So that's a little bit about how I got into it. So I wouldn't even say it was a bit like random and luck. And that really makes me think about my life going forward because I was like, I can't just keep relying on luck and being in the right place at the right time to get me to where I want. I really need to evaluate and think, what are my values? What do I want to get from life? What is my life's purpose? And then move towards it there.
Yeah, that intention, isn't it? Just making the next part of your life more intention. Because I feel like you do. I mean, and yeah, when you're young, you don't think you don't live your life thinking like that. You just do what comes naturally, right? And watching a child is a great example of that. What was the degree that you were doing? You 4th year you got the placement. What was the actual degree?
Yeah, so it's medicine. So to do psychiatry, you have to
medicine.
do.
Okay, right.
Yeah. So I when I decided between psychology and medicine, I went for medicine because I was like, this is going to challenge me a little bit more.
Right.
I want to do this, and then
Right. So just as you were talking there about why you liked psychiatry, it was like, it's because I can do this for that person, because I can understand this about that person. And there's a few other things you said there. So immediately what I can hear is you were doing things to help other people, right? Yeah. And I highlight that because at that age when you're, studying at university, perhaps not everyone, perhaps, and maybe this may be a generational thing as well, perhaps it's like, I want to do this because it will give me this. I want to do this because it will get me there, right? So the way you just framed it was very, very different to how I've heard it framed before. So were you aware of this? Were you aware of that? You mentioned values just now and purpose. Were you aware that this was a value that you had, which, again, I'm trying not to put words in your mouth, but I want to help people. Was that something you were aware of?
I think it was, and it comes back to our conversation about religion and spirituality. Something that my parents have always instilled in me is any gifts or talents you have a responsibility to share it with society. And if you don't, it makes you selfish. So if you have something to offer, you need to do the best of your abilities to make sure you can help the most amount of people with that. So how that kind of manifested in my life is, okay, well, you're good at academics, you're good at remembering lots of facts and regurgitating it and using education, you're good at problem solving, you've got good communication skills. So how can you put all those skills into a speciality and make that your life's purpose? So psychiatry fit all those boxes. It was very much aligned with the skill set I had. So I do think I was quite aware of that. And again, it was because it was something that was drummed into us from a young age. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So you're at university, you're doing your medicine, you get this placement. I guess that the placement is just the whole reason for the placement, right? Is to get to experience
Exposure
new
to
things
it.
and to see to exposure to it and see what resonates and what you might want to do. So I think it's fantastic that you found that. And of course, you also found your husband.
Yeah.
I say you found that, he might have found you. You found each other. And so this was at university. So Rajiv, who's your other half. Tell me about that.
So we met in first year, and I was very much in a place where I was like, do you know what? So I'll share a little bit more personally. I don't mind sharing this because Raj knows all about it. But before I went to university, I was in like a teenage sweetheart relationship. And I wanted to tell my parents about it because I felt really passionate about this relationship. And I thought the way that I make it serious is telling my parents. And obviously, being an Indian girl, aged 18, telling your parents about a boyfriend is a very serious thing. It's a very serious thing in my family anyway. Growing up, we weren't allowed to have boyfriends, but then there'd be an age where you're allowed to have a boyfriend, but he can't be a boyfriend. He has to become kind of your fiance or something, and then you have to get married. So that was what we were still told. So even though my parents were open-minded, when it came to relationships, it was something that we really didn't meet eye to eye on. So I decided to tell my dad, and I brought it up and I said, so this wasn't about Raj, this was about this boyfriend that I had kind of in the last few years of college. And I said, oh, I've got this boyfriend. And I thought he was going to I didn't know what the reaction was going to be, but I was like, I'm going to stand my ground and I'm going to fight for this because this is what I want. Just young me feeling like I'm really wise and know everything about life and love. And then my dad just calmly said, okay, what you need to understand is you've probably met kind of 1% of all the people you're going to meet in your life. You're still very early in your life and you've been exposed to school. That's as far as your social connections go. Because the next few years of your life, you are going to go into a whole new world where you can decide who you connect with. There's going to be lots of new experiences that you're exposed to, and there's going to be lots of growth. So what I suggest is that you don't commit to this. And that just made all the sense to me. And I said, you're right. So I literally broke up with that boyfriend and went to university ready to experience life. So in my first year, I kind of said, no, not getting into any relationships. I'm here for the experience to find out truly what do I want from life and allow myself to grow without any kind of restrictions of being in a relationship and what that might mean for me. But then I met Raj, and we were kind of, I guess from the starting, there was always some kind of connection. I knew that I wanted him to be more than a friend, but I was like, I don't want to do it just yet. First year of uni, I've still got 5 years left. I just want to have fun with my friends. And I voiced that to him, and he was like, okay, yeah, that's fine. We can just be friends. And then a week later, he was like, so my friends were just asking like, what's happening with us. So I told them that you're my girlfriend. And I was like, okay, then. And then that was it. So it was like the relationship state was forced upon me. However, I was very happy about it. And then we had our ups and downs through uni, because I think what my dad said was important. We are still growing at that stage. So we were both going through different phases of personal growth as we went through a very difficult course. We're still living in a bit of a bubble when you're at university. But through those experiences, we grew and our relationship grew stronger. Then we both moved back home. So we were both at university together. And then he moved back to Leicester. I moved in with my parents back in Birmingham. So there was that distance, and we were working on shifts. So it was really hard to kind of meet each other. And it felt like we were doing a long distance, even though we were only 1 hour away. But then things kind of just settled down, and we said, actually, the best way for us to spend time together is to get married. And it took Raj a bit of convincing to decide. And we met in the middle. I wanted to get married in 1 year. He said 3 years. So we got married in 2 years. And that's kind of led us to where we were. So yeah, I think the thing that I kept holding on to was what my dad said, is that you have to grow yourself, and then you'll be able to find the person, and just be open to so many more experiences, rather than just saying, I'm going to find that person to spend the whole of my life with when you're quite young. And that's sold to us again in society, isn't it? Like, teenage love. And some of these things, they work out. I've got friends that they've kind of been together since they've been like 13, 14, and they've got married. And that works for some people. But I just think I really enjoyed having that space to grow and refine myself in those really crucial years, and be my own person, and then work out, what do I want from life? What do I want from a partner? And now we're on a journey where we're growing together, which is really important. So we've still given ourselves that space. We might be going on different tangents, but supporting each other with it.
Amazing. I love that. Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that. So you met Raj in the first year of university. Yeah. So at what point, I'm interested to know, what point did you tell your dad?
Well, they say that they knew. I wanted to, again, just be as honest as possible. So I pretty much told them quite soon after. And my mom was like, what, a boyfriend? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, surely not. And she just wanted me to call him like a special friend. I'm like, no, Mom, he's a boyfriend. Okay, we're exclusive. Like, it is a boyfriend. I know you're in denial and you don't want me to say that, but I'm being honest with you and I'm telling you, you can make whatever you want from it. And I think my dad kind of asked me a few weeks into the relationship, like, oh, you seem different. What's going on? So then I used that as an opportunity to tell him. It was really funny because in our wedding speech, my dad pretended as if he didn't know about how long we'd been dating. So one of my friends gave a speech and he said they've been together for 8 years. And then when my dad did his speech, he was like, "Oh, I thought they'd be going out for 5 years." It was all just for a joke, but they knew pretty early on. And yeah, I think my dad felt that he'd done his part by telling me his bit of wisdom, and that I'd applied it now. So they were fine with it, surprisingly. Fantastic. But I've always been, out of my 3 sisters, I've always been the one that pushes the boat out, and a bit of a rebel. So if I want something, I will just do it and then tell my parents about it later, and then they can make of it what they want.
It's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission, right? That's
yeah.
Yeah, I live by that as well. So Raj was on the same university course as you, so he's doing medicine, and he's now training to be a GP. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah,
so there's at the end now.
There's those slightly different paths. Okay, so you go through university. You're with Raj. What happens next? What's kind of your journey? What was your sort of? Do you remember your mindset then? What did you want to do?
I guess even at that time, when I was choosing psychiatry, just to go a little bit back, I had a lot of people telling me don't do it. So psychiatry used to be up until like the last 2 years really under recruited area, because there's not much kind of fame or fun or status associated with it. Even within the medical community, if you're a psychiatrist, you're kind of looked down on. Okay. You're not that prestige. If you're a surgeon, that's great. And I remember people when I used to do my training, people ask me, what do you want to do? I say psychiatry, and they'll say, you know, you can really do better than that. As if it was like the dumb person's choice, or like you should apply for surgery because you'd be really good at doing that and you can apply yourself. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I might be good at it, but I don't enjoy it. And it's not what I want to do with my life. So I had a lot of that. Even Raj at one point, he wasn't very supportive of me doing psychiatry. It was really funny. And then at one point I just had to put my foot down and say, Raj, every time that you are saying things about psychiatry, you are not being supportive. So I need you. If you've got nothing to say better, I just don't want you to make any comments about psychiatry. That's what I'm going to do. And that's the way I'm going to go forward. So there's lots of still, again, at that point, people dissuading me from that career. So yeah. And then I guess we both, looking back at that time, even though I decided I wanted to do psychiatry, so I had that clarity. When you're at med school, you're still living in a bubble. So you still really don't know what you want from life. You're still a bit naive. And then you get out of university, you graduate in July, and then in August, you start your job as a doctor. And it is the most scariest thing ever. It's the biggest transition you have to ever make. You think kind of going from like secondary school to college as a transition, and college to university, this was like something that you could never prepare for. And I was always a very diligent student, like worked hard, knew my stuff, but nothing prepared you for doing kind of a 12-hour day, doing night shifts on your own, and all the emotional experiences. And it was probably the most difficult 2 years of my life, doing those years. So what happens in training is once you graduate, you have to do 2 years. It's called foundation years, foundation year 1 and 2 within the NHS. And in that, you rotate between jobs every 4 months. So every 4 months, you'll do a new job. And that's so that you can learn all the basic skills you need to. And then after that, you decide to do your speciality. So even though I knew I needed to do psychiatry, I have to go through these hurdles of doing the 2 years. And the only thing that really kept me going is knowing that I had psychiatry at the end. But it was really, really difficult. I remember one of my first night shifts, and a patient died, and I knew the patient really well. I knew all my patients really well. I'd always have that emotional connection with them. I'd get to know their family, get to know their story more than that's bed 3 with appendicitis or something like that. So when I was working in surgery, first night shift, and my patient died. And it was the most horrific experience ever in terms of the support I was given, lack of support I was given, kind of lack of debrief. And I was going on, straight after the night shift, I was going on holiday because I had some days off. And I remember having nightmares for like the next 2 weeks of that scenario, just replaying it, waking up screaming, not sleeping well, and just becoming a really cautious doctor. Anything I did, I'd be second guessing myself. Although there was nothing that I did wrong in that patient's case or anything. It was a really unwell patient and they died, but it really, really impacted me. And the only thing that got me through at that point was living at home with my family. And lots of doctors don't do that when they go and do their jobs. The way it works is you do an exam after you finish your medicine degree and you get ranked in the whole of the UK. And depending on how you score based on all your exams you've done so far and then one other exam, you get scored. And then you say where you want to go, where you want to work. And depending on where you are on that ranking, you get placed there. So let's say I was second in that ranking, I would get my first choice. But if I was kind of 200th in that ranking, I might get my 20th job choice.
I see. Right.
So lucky for me, I got to stay at home with my family, and that was the thing that got me through, because otherwise there wasn't that support in the hospitals to get me through that. And there was so many more experiences I had like that. I probably had 3 where it really damaged my mental health, and I was having nightmares and flashbacks that lasted about 2-3 weeks. And then I was able to kind of get myself back to normal functioning because I had the family support around me, and the care and the attention. They just kept me on track. But yeah, it was really difficult. It was hard. And even at that time, it was hard to kind of bring your full self to a relationship. It was pretty much Raj was working, I was working, and then we'd find time to meet like one day a month and see how we're doing. And that can have a real toll on the relationship as well. But the thing that got us both going through is this is the hardest part, and it's going to be over in 2 years. And then we can think about getting married. So yeah, that's a little bit of a snapshot. And there's a really good TV show on at the moment, which is called This Is Going to Hurt. And it's a really good depiction of what it's like to be a junior doctor and the stresses that you have to go under. Because you have to remember, when you're newly qualified, I was 22, 23. So being that young and doing CPR and then a patient dying in front of you is just very, very difficult kind of circumstances to be in. So and it's been like 10 years since that time, and it still feels as crystal clear as it happened.
I mean, it's sorry to hear that you went through that experience, and again, thank you for sharing. But it's trauma, isn't it? It's a traumatic experience that we go through, and it etches in your memory. You mentioned This Is Going to Hurt, which I'm sure many people are watching. I actually find that quite difficult to watch, that show. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. And I'm not even a doctor. I'm not even a medical. I don't even work in hospital. My wife does, and it is quite harrowing just to see what people go through. And I haven't watched all of it, but there's a junior doctor in that, isn't there? And you can see her the stress that she goes through and her experience. And I always wondered that. I was like, that moment where it's like, okay, it's over to you. Here you go. And you're like you mentioned, you're the person in hospital who anything goes wrong, they're coming to
That's
you.
Yeah.
That's you.
Yeah.
And I would just feel that's an awful lot of pressure to put on a young set of shoulders, albeit they've studied for so long, the academics are good, all of that. In that moment,
in that situation,
in that situation, you are a human being who's been exposed to a traumatic event, and you're going to respond in that way. And I think no amount of training is going to help with that. And I think things like us talking about it, other podcasts talking about it, this TV show, I think there's more awareness now being brought into the mainstream about this, because how many doctors? I just sit back and think, and this is not to think too negatively about the world, but it's like how many lives, young lives, who have had amazing aspirations to go on and do great things have been literally just stopped dead in their tracks because of that, those first 2 years or that first year's experience. And I'm sure that there's statistics on this, and it's, and I think with more awareness, we can try to help. And you mentioned there was a lack of support when you went through this, and I'm sure that's, again, I'm not speaking on behalf of the NHS. I would like to think there is a gradual shift towards changing that, because there's a lot more emphasis on mental health, not just for patients or people using the NHS services, but for the staff and the practitioners themselves. So I like to think that is changing as we go forward.
There is more support, definitely.
Yeah.
But it's the culture that needs to change, isn't it?
Right.
Because we can keep putting in courses and you can have an extra debrief. But what I really needed in that moment was my consultant just to sit with me and say, okay, this is really difficult. It's your first one. This happens. This is how I felt when I went through it. What support do you need to move forward? How can we help you? And there was none of that. I got silent treatment for like 2 weeks after that, which made me feel like I'd done something wrong.
Sure.
When actually there was nothing. And I was constantly checking the patient's notes and seeing, was there an update? Was there going to be a coroner's? Was there going to be an investigation? Because suddenly I thought, well, if he's not speaking to me, that must mean that I've done something wrong. But there was nothing. And I I remember obsessing over it and talking to colleagues about it and all the details. And they're like, there's nothing, like, it was just, that was going to happen. And it was unfortunate that it happened. But
and you were the one that was there.
Playing in my head. Yeah. And the fact that I was there, I felt that makes me responsible for it.
Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that. So obviously your husband was working at the same time as well. Did it help having him, because he may have gone through similar experiences and you know had a similar experience to you as well?
It's funny because he talks about it now, and he was like, I remember the first shift that I came home and I cried. And I was like, I didn't know about that. You didn't ring me. You didn't tell me.
Right.
So I think in that moment, there's almost maybe some, again, bringing back to shame, some shame that like, I'm here, I've made it, but oh shit, do I want this? Like, this is, can I handle this? And you start questioning, like, are you good enough for it? I definitely question, like, am I good enough to do this job?
It's that imposter syndrome, doesn't it? You get hit with it.
Yeah. And he must have thought, I'm sure I did share it with him, probably didn't share it because I was in such a state of shock, how badly it had affected me, or that I was crying before every shift and after every shift. Maybe I didn't share that with him. Again, there was that shame of, oh, what if he thinks I'm not coping? It must have been there underlying, even if I wasn't aware of it. And he talks about it now, and I'm like, oh, I went through the same, and it was really, really difficult. So I don't think we shared as much as we wanted. And then when we saw each other, we were so excited to see each other, and we'd miss each other so much. Then it was just about going out and spending the money that we had earned on fancy meals and having a good time. And again, just shutting it away. Let's pretend that difficult thing isn't happening. We've got a day to spend together. Let's just make the most of it. And that would be it, really.
But that's, I mean,
way of coping, I guess.
Yeah, it's a coping mechanism, but I don't look at it as shutting it out. I feel like it's just taking action to relieve any suffering that we may be feeling in the moment. It's self-compassion, isn't it? It's saying, look, I'm going through a hard time right now. It's been a terrible experience. What can I do to make myself feel better? I want to spend some time with my loved one. We're going to enjoy ourselves. We're going to spend our hard-earned money on whatever it is. And I want to talk about that because I heard your conversation with your husband about spending money, which we'll talk about in a moment. And I want to, as I said, just relieve some of that suffering. But there's an awareness around that. So I think that's perfectly normal and a perfectly good thing to do. You mentioned money, so I wasn't what I wanted to ask you now, but I heard it wasn't in the podcast. It wasn't in the podcast. You were talking about this, right?
Yes,
about how your approach to spending money and how your approach to life is right now. So to tell us a bit about that, because what I took from that is that there's a lot of intention and thought behind where you put your energies now. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Massively. I think I'd like to first start with just my relationship with money, actually, because that's where the awareness needs to start. Rather than thinking, where am I spending money on right now? You need to think, where did my ideas about money come from? And although I say I had a stable upbringing, my dad was self-employed and he was the main breadwinner. And this is something that I'm going to do a whole podcast with my dad on. But little side story, we were in a normal government school, and then my mum thought, you know what, this isn't good enough. And it was a time when like I don't think there was like homework wasn't normal. Mum was like, why are they not getting homework? They need to get homework because that's the way they're going to learn. So then they found a private school. So we all went to this private school for a year, but unfortunately it was closing down. My dad was very interested in education, and he thinks that the best way to improve society is through education, because every child goes through education. So then he decided that he was going to take over this private school, and he did. So he got on board the rest of the parents and said, okay, well, we'll be the board of directors for this school, and we will fund this school. We will put our children through it. And that's the way that we can keep it going, because this community really needs it. And there's a need for it. So let's do it. Unfortunately, all the parents then backed down and weren't willing to contribute financially. So my dad kind of self-funded the whole project. With all his savings, we remortgaged our house, which was almost about to be paid off, and got into this kind of, let's start this private school. And it was great. But of course, my dad knew the stuff about the education, but the business side of things, the investment just wasn't there, even though he'd pumped so much money into it. And then the thing that we needed also was children to keep applying for it. But we were in the area that we lived in, there wasn't a real demand for a private school where it had opened. So that led to about 5 years of financial ups and downs, like crazy ups and downs. And friends and family that listen to this, they will not even be aware of it, because my dad didn't, and my mom and dad both did an amazing effort of still giving us everything that we needed, the basic needs and the nice little luxuries, despite the bank balance being like absolutely rubbish, and still keeping their cool through all of this. Like the close family friends that know my dad, they're like, we were so surprised you haven't had a heart attack or stroke, the amount of stress you're under then. So I think that's when my relationship with money kind of started, because prior to that, everything was very, very stable. I didn't really think about money. But at that point, I realized, oh, money comes and goes, and you can have a deficit of it, and it can make life really, really stressful. Because I remember my mom being very stressed about it. So I think that also leads into why I decided to do medicine. Because even though my parents were very much self-employed life, that's all I'd seen. It was funny that I'm the only one that had gone into doing a job, which I had a boss and I had a monthly pay slip, and I knew what that pay slip was going to be, because that did traumatize me, seeing those fluctuations in kind of finances. So that's where I chose to do medicine. That's where it partly came from. And it also, part of me felt like, because I'd kind of grown up with a nice, stable lifestyle, part of me wanted to do the whole keeping up appearances part. So when I did have money, I wanted to portray a very stable financial life. And that would mean that I'd want to spend on nice fancy things, nice clothes, things like that. So very superficial things. So when I started earning money from quite a young age, the entrepreneurial side came through. Me and my sister started up a dance company when we were 16, and we got paid for weekly classes, and we also used to do dances at people's weddings, which used to earn us quite a lot of money back then. So it was a bit more than pocket money. So when I used to get that money, I used to go and get myself a new handbag or buy some nice clothes and things. And it used to be very superficial, because in my head, again, I think it comes from the shame part of thing. The shame kind of kicked in with the lack of money. There was shame associated with that. Okay, so you need to show to everyone that everything is fine. How do you do that? By having fancy things. So I think that's why my journey with kind of relationship with money started and evolved. And then as I think it's probably changed when I got married, and Raj would be like, why are you paying so much for that? And I'd be like, that's how much you pay for it. And he's like, no, you can look for deals. You can get vouchers. You can be a bit more savvy. And I looked at him and I was like, Raj, don't be so stingy. And he was like, no, babe, it's not about being stingy. It's just about, if you've got money, we got to treat each penny carefully and use it intentionally. I was like, okay, yeah, maybe. And that's when I started being a bit more savvy with my money. And then I went a bit deeper and thought, actually, why do I need this? And was questioning everything that I was buying. Was I doing it for keeping up appearances? Yes. So then it started really kind of scaling back and thinking, okay, what do you actually need in life? And then I was also going through kind of learning about the Marie Kondo method, which is about decluttering and having less. And if you've got less, then your mind is clearer. So I thought, okay, well, both of these things kind of fit together. So now the way I think about money, I'm trying to improve my relationship with it. So I see money more as an energy, as a type of energy. So you need money to keep things going. It's the energy that keep things flowing. So you still need a basic amount. The more money you have can give you energy to do more, so help others. But in terms of your personal life, there isn't much money that you actually need. So when we do shopping, when I do a clothes shop every 6 months, and I will buy like 4 or 5 items, and that's about it. So I have very minimal wardrobe now. I have 30 items in my wardrobe that I rotate every season. And that's how I work out. So it cuts out that decision making as well. And I am no longer spending like before, when I used to live with my parents, there used to be ASOS parcels coming through the door all the time. And it used to be constant. And I used to want like the newest thing, the nicest thing. And I'd buy things. I'd be like, oh, I'll buy this and I can wear it in the future. And I never wear it in the future. So there's lots of kind of, I just want to look the best. I would never want to repeat an outfit twice. Really silly, superficial things when I look back at it. But it was all from this place of shame and wanting to create an image so that even if things weren't going well, I could still dress up nice and people wouldn't know that something's going on in the background. So that's where we are with money now. We spend very, very carefully. The things that we do like to spend on is experiences. So we like to have nice holidays, to experience different cultures, and also really use that time to rest and rejuvenate and shut off from anywhere. And maybe this will change, and maybe we will go to more kind of, I guess, basic and less expensive holidays. We may do, but that's where we prioritize our spends at the moment. And then we also like having nice meals with our friends and each other, because that's a place where we feel we can connect and socialize and really relax as well. So that's like a bit of it goes a bit round to explain about the money and the spending, but that's how I've got there. So I think everyone should really be thinking, what is my relationship from money? How have I understood money from a young age? What have I been through to create that narrative about money? And how do I want to change that now? Because it'd be silly for me to say, oh, now I'm at a place where I don't need money. Well, actually I do, because I'm living in society. If I was a monk, that'd be different. If I was doing something else, that'd be different. But at this moment in time, I need money to sustain a lifestyle, but that lifestyle can be as minimalist as possible. Not what society thinks I need, but what I need. So on the podcast, we talk about our house and people thinking that, well, if you've got two doctor incomes, then surely you should be getting a really nice house. We've got a house which is half of what we were told we could afford. Again, why do you want to live with such a big debt if you don't need it? Is it just for keeping up appearances? It's quite a lot to pay if you want to show your house off once a year to someone that's going to come that doesn't really match you. So
it's such a refreshing approach, because it's the same. Me and my wife have had this very similar experience and similar kind of how we've structured things. And just like I'm more than my wife. I'm very much been about keeping up appearances. I started in a career very early. I came across money very, very early in my life, and I was like, oh, this is great. And back then, money was the answer. That's what I was led to believe by society, that it's all about earning money. Going back to something you said earlier about how you got people were trying to dissuade you from the career that you chose as a psychiatry, and you stuck to your guns. I remember I wanted to go into physiotherapy. And I got dissuaded very similar, like you can't earn any money. That was the main argument. You're not going to earn any money as a physiotherapist. Why would you want to waste your time doing that? And that was enough for me. I was like, oh yeah, okay, fine. Where can I earn the most money? And I think back, well, why did I want to earn all that money? And it was really just to have the things. My dad was self-employed as well. We weren't poor by any stretch of the imagination, but we weren't. There wasn't an abundance of money. I still had to buy my trainers from Woolworths, and I had to I couldn't wear the brands that everyone else was wearing. And so when I had money, I felt like I had to go back and fix that. And in my adult life, I have to have the nicest things. I have to have the nice suits and have the whatever it is. And later in life, it was more about, well, what's really what's really important to me, what's going to bring me the most satisfaction. And having met my wife and living abroad for so many years, it was about those experiences. It was about having connection. And one of my favorite phrases at the moment is connection is the key to fulfillment. So thank you, Nilesh Satguru, for that phrase. But he says it all the time. Connection is the key to fulfillment. So what you've just said is that you're spending money on holidays and going out for nice meals with your friends. All of that is about connecting with people. All of that is about connection, because through that connection, we feel more fulfilled. We feel like I'm actually living a life which is purposeful, living a life which is meaningful to me. And if that means to you having experiences that are going to, live with you for the rest of your life, as opposed to a handbag or a pair of trainers or a phone that you're going to probably throw out after a couple of years. And, I learned this lesson very recently, in the last sort of 10 years, actually since meeting my wife, because I looked at her grandparents, and it was the first time I met Asian, Indian, Gujarati grandparents, both parents, fortunately for her at the time, grandmother and grandfather, who would just travel the world, and they would just constantly be out on cruises, on planes, on going on safari and going these places. And I remember speaking to him about this, and he said, this is my wife's grandfather, and he goes, your money, just like you said, money's going to come and go. The things you buy with money will come and go. But what you're going to remember when you're my age is the experiences that you've had in your life. And that's so true, isn't it? It's those experiences. So how can I make those experiences as enriching and as fulfilling as possible? And for me and for us, that meant spending a lot of our money on travel at the time. So we, when we lived overseas before children, that we would travel a lot. We would spend money on holidays. We, like you, we did long distance for some years before we were married, and that was great because that meant when we did spend time together, it was meaningful. It was, we would spend the money on a holiday or on a staycation. We even had something. It's the first time I'm saying this out loud in public. We even had a love fund, and the love fund was, we'd both put in money every month to this one bank account, and that would be, I think it was 100 quid each. I think at the time, so she put 100. So it was 200 quid a month going into this fund, and then whenever we got together, we got to spend that money. And that love fund funded holidays and travels and all sorts of things. So. It's that intention, isn't it? Just coming back to what we were saying, it's having that intention of why do I want to spend this money? But the story about you buying your house and thinking, I don't need a big house. And you mentioned it, but I want to kind of touch on this point a little bit more. There must have been the stereotype, you mentioned it, the two doctors, you must have a big house, that stereotype is there, but it must have been quite difficult to sort of separate yourself from that, or was it? Maybe it wasn't for you.
I think it was all a process. It took us quite a long time to get our house. So in that time, we viewed loads of things. And the house we've got right now was the cheapest we viewed. It was properly at the lower end. And actually, it wasn't even on our radar because it was so cheap. It wasn't in our filters of our searching. So it was excluded from our minds. So you're right. It wasn't something that we both kind of came to realization suddenly before we started searching. It took some searching to do. And I think from Raj's point of view, I'm not blaming him, but he was very much more about we need the big, fancy, nice house. And it took some time to persuade him that, look, actually, we can get nice things, but we don't have to spend so much on it. And the one phrase I kept using was, we've got to live within our means, not about what other people want. And that's not, I wasn't saying, look, we're poor, we need a cheap house. I wasn't saying that. I'm saying, let's just try to, because it's false money, isn't it? When you get a mortgage for $500,000 house, that is all debt. It's not like you have, unless you're going to be a cash buyer, which we're definitely not in the position for, then that is all debt. So what do you earn? What have you earned? Well, you have earned a huge debt. To see it like that rather than kind of, we're going for a cheaper house. I was like, we can have a smaller debt instead of a larger debt. So think of it like that. And we've got to keep living within our means. Think about what is affordable for us, what gives us freedom, flexibility, what are our priorities. We didn't want to go for a more expensive house if it meant that we couldn't go on our holidays. So we had to do that important priority. We had to think, where do we want our money to go? And also, we want that flexibility. Raj is now able to not work for 2 months because we can pay the mortgage on my salary. And that's really important. If we went for a more expensive house, he would not have the option, and he would be forced into doing some full-time GP work for a long time. And then when you have children, you have the finances with that as well. So we wanted something that would give us flexibility. And there's loads of extremes of this. We are doing a smaller version of this, but some people will say, well, I've seen these programs where people have these, I can't remember what they're called. They're maybe mini houses or one
Tiny
bedroom.
homes.
Tiny house, that's it. Yes, tiny homes. So they've gone to the full extreme and they've bought something which costs them like £500, and that's it. They are mortgage free. They don't have any kind of financial responsibility or anything. They can move around and do whatever they feel. If they don't want to work, they don't have to work at all. They can just live. So that's one extreme of it. Obviously, we're not there, and it takes a lot to live a life like that, but we can achieve it in small things. So everyone might be, when they're listening to this, they're like, oh, it's all right for you. Like maybe you're in a different place. But no, actually, everyone can think about how they're using their money. Are you trying to do more savings? Are you shopping around for things? And in my head, I had to get rid of that stereotype that actually shopping around and making savings is stingy. Again, comes from the cooking experiences. Why would you pay more for something if you can pay less for it? No one's going to know how much you paid for it. Only you will know. So pay less. So yeah. And that thought came from my family a lot about, and I don't know what it is. Maybe because sometimes Patels are kind of scrutinized for being stingy. So maybe my parents really didn't want to be stingy. So they would pay whatever for anything. They would never bargain, or they would pretend they're bargaining and they'd be really awful at it and probably end up paying more than they were supposed to. So I had to undo that thinking as well. So yeah.
Well, it's a stereotype there. You mentioned the Patels, but I think just generally there's a stereotype that Indians, Gujarati people, we're stingy. We're a stingy culture. So maybe there's a part of me when I was young. I look back now and I think definitely there was this like, it's like, hey, I ain't stingy. Look at me, I've got a mate, and I'd go into the bar after work. Oh yeah, I'll buy everyone a drink, And it was again, it was keeping up appearances. It's like, oh, look at Sunjay. He's not a typical Indian. He likes to spend his money, and there's an element of that, but. Yeah, I love that. And I think, it is, I mean, how many people do fall into that? I don't want to call it a trap because for some people it may be a way of life that they enjoy, but how many people do fall into that, society's way of doing things? You mentioned two doctors, young, you mentioned the salary, it's a guaranteed salary, it's a decent salary, there's two of you. Let's buy this big house. We need both of us to work to pay. Oh no, now we both have to work to pay this mortgage off. It's almost like suddenly, to me, the way I look at it is the world. Your view is like this of the world, and then you get that mortgage. You get you need the two of you to work, and suddenly it becomes like that. It's like, right, what am I? What is my purpose in? Yeah, what is my purpose in life? Well, my purpose in life now is to pay this huge mortgage that I'm in debt of, and look after my children and pay for their whatever I got to pay for them. And then you just end up waking up and you're 45, 50 years old, and you just think, what have I done? What's been going on?
And then you'll be like, I'll do it when I retire. And I absolutely hate that phrase. If you want to do something, do it now. Why are you waiting till you're old? You might be in a wheelchair. God knows what's in store for you in terms of your health. What you can control is right now. So if you want to do something.
Yes. Yeah. Do the things that you are really passionate about now. Live your life. For us, it was holidays as well. It's like, let's make sure we can. And, we lived abroad for 10 years, so we had that freedom. And I think and again, I used to get also, why are you paying rent? You've been paying rent for so long. As well. Yeah. And, and I look back and if I wanted to go back and calculate, if I really wanted to depress myself, I could go back and calculate how much rent I've given to someone else. I'm not going to do that because at the time it enabled me an element of freedom to be able to do the things that I wanted to do, to move countries, to move around within that country, to come back here and live look, we've been back here for 4 years and we've lived in several different places before we bought this home. And even before buying this home, we were both like, do we really want to commit to this? Like,
settle down? Yeah.
Is this, we're married, we've got kids, but we'd still, it became real the moment we signed that mortgage paper. So I get it. I totally get it. And I think knowing those values and knowing that you're being intentional with your spending and it's not to say that your home isn't something you value, because of course you do, but the way that I think about things and the places I've lived in my life, I've lived in rental places and I've never thought of them as someone else's, because you make it what you want, right? You make it your home, you make it your creature comforts. And your home is just where your heart is, isn't it? So I love that way of thinking. And I think it also helps you to highlight what really is important to you. It's like, okay, well, if I have to pay this is my level of this is my outgoings, these are my bills. What's that going to stop me from being able to do in my life that I really enjoy doing? And a lot of people may go through this in a different way. So they might say, well, okay, well, we've got this mortgage, we've got these bills. Oh, I can't go to the gym anymore, so I'm going to stop going to the gym. Oh, I can't have private medical insurance, so I'm going to stop doing that. And all these things that we start to take away from our lives. Well, we put them in there in the first place because they probably meant something to us. And then it's almost, again, I feel like in society, it's like, well, you should be making those sacrifices because you need to have a home. You need to be investing in a home. You need to be investing in a future. And yes, you absolutely do have to do a lot of those things. But I just feel like a lot of people, and, you know, having gone through this myself, I feel like we do it, but at the sacrifice of oneself. You know, you sacrifice your own well-being, your own purpose in life, your own things that you want to do for the sake of this model that society has put in front of you of what life should be like. And I just feel like there's a different way.
Yeah. And just touching on that, like, people are like, yeah, well, you can't have it all, but you can. It just depends what your definition of have it all is. Because if your definition of have it all is what Instagram is showing you, yes, you can't, because you don't know what actually is going on in that person. Like, they do not have it all. They are materialistic, they've got it, but are they lacking emotionally? Yes, massively. Do they have problems with body image? Yes, hugely. That's why they have to put all those pictures up. So you need to decide what your have it all looks like. And when you actually put it on paper, it's not much at all. It's literally so minimal, and half of it doesn't even cost money because it's things like relationships. So once you decide what your have it all is, then you can make sure that everything that you do works towards that. Like you said, doing it that way around, rather than, okay, I've got all these things, now I need to see if I can fit in my priorities, and actually it doesn't fit in, so I need to forego that. No, you don't need to. And people think like things like private medical insurance, that, oh, you have to be really privileged to have it. No, actually, because if you just looked at your finances in a really, really smart way, obviously you need to have a certain basic income salary.
Sure.
I think a lot more people would be able to afford that private medical insurance. And this might sound really controversial, but try it yourself. Go through your finances, see what you're paying for. Maybe actually, what do you value more, Netflix or that private medical insurance? So there's some ways that you can think about it. And actually, even though this idea about where I'm spending my money, I feel like I'm in a good place right now, I have to constantly reevaluate that. I was just thinking about it the other day. I was like, we're spending quite a lot of money on going out. What I'm really enjoying right now is cooking and hosting. So I was like, Raj, when we go forward now, instead of going out for these meals, let's have small dinner parties at our house, because it's really nice. Some people haven't seen our home. We can host and I can make all these nice dishes. So that's, again, another way. It doesn't take away from that connection. It's just a cheaper way of doing it, because it's going to cost me like £10 from Aldi to get all my ingredients. That's it. As opposed to me and him both spending £50 on a meal, £100 on going out. And it saves the other person as well. Recently, my friends were saying, oh, because it's my 30th in April. And they were like, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't want to do anything. And they're like, no, but we really want to celebrate you. And I said, you get to celebrate me all the time. I was like, on my birthday, you can take 5 minutes to reflect on me. Just do that, because it's not going to cost you. It's not going to cost me. It's good use of your time and your money. They were like, no, but we really want to. And I was like, look, the reason why 30th celebrations are big is because society has made it a big thing. Why is it 30? Yeah. Why is it not 20? Why did no one say 20 was going to be the time where you do a big celebration? Yeah, we do 21, coming of age. All of these things are created by society. So I was like, I don't really want to do anything. I've already decided I'm going on a really nice holiday with my husband. That's how I am spending my money on myself for my 30th. But I was like, I don't see why I need you to spend money if we go out for a fancy meal. Like, that's going to be a waste of your time and your money. And it sounds a bit too drastic, but that's how I feel right now. And I'm like, I was speaking to my husband about it, and he was like, are you sure you really don't want to do anything? I was like, I really don't want to. I think I've been celebrating my birthday in fancy ways up till now because that's what society said, and I didn't feel like I had an option. But now that I know I do have the option, I was like, the most it will be is, again, we'll host a little house party at our home, and that's it, just with our closest friends and families. And I was like, I will be more than content with that. We can call it a housewarming / birthday party, because, again, I don't think that it needs to have so much kind of hoo-ha around it and so much money poured into it. Like, we spend so much money. I spent so much money on my wedding, and looking back, I would do things differently. I absolutely loved it. It was the best thing ever. But I know I could have got the same, because the thing that made that celebration so good was the love and the connection that we had with people, and we could create that for much smaller kind of money. So yeah, that's about how I'm trying to use it in practice every day, and just being really intentional.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a good, just a good way to think about things, and especially without sounding like the older guy, the older person telling young, but as a younger person, I think before having kids as well, that's quite a nice way to think about things, because of course if children come along, there's going to be obviously a lot of changes to that, and yeah. So then you kind of have to reevaluate. And I heard you also, I think it was on the story you mentioned about raising kids, and how you had different views and opinions on we talked about society and education. We talked about that, as growing up, I'm sure, again, I mentioned it before, all parents want their kids to do well, but I feel like as an Asian there was a little bit more emphasis on you must go to university, you must get what you do, and you have a slightly different take on this. So can you just share a little bit about what you were talking about the other day, about your differences of viewpoint on that?
So we were talking about, like, when our children grow up, we don't have any children yet, about what we want them to do in life. I don't know where the conversation started. And I explained to Raj, I was like, we have to be very intentional with our parenting, and we have to make sure we're not letting all the outside kind of societal experiences becoming how we parent. We should think about how we want to parent. I said one of the most important things is making sure that children have a choice of what they want to do in life. We have to give them all the experiences. So, okay, if they want to do karate, take them there. If they want to do an instrument, and give them as much experiences in their life. But then it's up to them to decide which path they want to take. And if that means that they want to, the example that I gave, and I wanted to give a really extreme example on purpose just to see what he would say. I was like, if they want to work in McDonald's and that's their life purpose, that's fine. Let them do that. And he was like, no, they have to go to university. I was like, no, they don't, Raj, because maybe that's not where their skills are. That's where our skills are. We are academic. There is nothing to say that our children will like that or will thrive in that area, will enjoy it. And you've learnt yourself that actually just being good at something doesn't mean you're going to enjoy it. So I was like, we just have to let them do what they want to do. And if you let someone encourage them to pursue their passion, they will automatically become successful with that. And then the money will follow, rather than thinking, where is the money? Let me go where the money is. So yeah, that's the kind of conversation that we had in a nutshell. And the thing that I was touching on with that is my younger sister. She is a professional Indian classical contemporary dancer. She didn't go to university.
Amazing.
So straight after she finished, it was really funny because my parents, they tried their best, but doing parenting is also a learning curve. So we always say that my eldest sister, she was kind of the guinea pig, and then things got better as we went down. So with her, in their minds, they said university, go to university. My dad wasn't allowed to take his English GCSE because they said that because he was an immigrant, he has to do another version of an English exam, like a basics English. So because of that, he couldn't go to university when he wanted to. And then he ended up doing masters when he was 30 later on. So I think in his head, he wanted to make sure that there was no barriers for us to go to university. So she wanted to really do makeup and kind of creative industry. And she wanted to do like high fashion makeup and things like that. But she was told, no, you have to go to university. So there was that pressure for her. So she went to university, did a degree in psychology, and then finished. Didn't really enjoy anything. Tried a few placements. In the end, she started doing her makeup, and now she is a very successful makeup artist. So when it came to me, I was a little bit, I guess, a bit straightforward. I kind of decided what I wanted to do. They guided me, and then I ended up doing what I wanted. And I'm coming back to the doing something a bit more self-employed side of things. With my little sister, she always been really creative. Her academics has never been her strongest suit, and that was fine. That was actually celebrated. I remember whenever she had exams out, we'd always plan we were going to go for a meal to celebrate, but there was never emphasis on what grade she got. So I remember once we went to a meal and she'd got a D in maths, and my parents had been paying for private tuition for her to improve her maths, and it was fine. And it was nice because that experience made her realize that actually my grades is not what makes my worth. The fact that I tried and I gave it a go, it's all right. We still celebrated that I actually sat the exam, and whatever came of it, came of it. So she's very creative. So she wanted to do fine art at university. My mum was a little bit like, when you do fine art, what are you going to do? And Vidya was like, I think I might work in an art gallery. I'm not too sure. We'll just see what happens. But my parents were very supportive of her decisions. She applied for the course. She got it. She deferred the entry because she was like, do you know what? I think my dance might go somewhere. They were like, all right. So we'd all been trained in dancing, but we kind of did it professionally to a certain age, and then it became a hobby. We kind of let it slide. Well, my parents were very encouraging. They loved us dancing. They always wanted to just progress in that area. So she took a year out. She went to India, trained, and then there was this competition that was launched. It was called BBC Young Dancer, and it was the first year that they were kind of putting together all dancers in the UK and broadcasting on the BBC. And she got to the finals, and she represented South Asian dance in the finals on BBC, and it was the most amazing moment ever. And that kickstarted her career. So from that point, she kind of gave up her university place, didn't go to university, and since then has been building her career. And she's an international kind of superstar now. She's brilliant. And actually what she's done has paved the way for lots of dancers. So I know lots of stories of other dancers that have got the courage, that are her age or even older, that have given up their jobs or not done the conventional route because they've seen actually, if you put everything into it, you will get it back. And it has its highs and lows and lots of sacrifices. It's a hard journey. But that's what she's earned. And I said, look, Reg, if it wasn't for my parents pushing her, the world would have been they wouldn't have seen Vidya's beautiful art, and they would have been robbed of her, because when she's on stage, I always say it's like divinity on stage. Something happens and it's like a higher force at play. And I said, imagine if my parents had been strong. We don't know what our child is going to be. They might be a musician, they might be an artist, they might be an entrepreneur, they may be a scientist, and we just have to give them everything, nurture them, let them go on the path. And it might not be an easy path, and they might fail a few times along the way. We have to keep encouraging them and showing them it's not your passes or fails that make your self-worth. It's the trying and the effort that really counts. So I was just reflecting on really how Vidya's career turned out and how good it was. And I think over time, Raj has now understood that. In the podcast, we talk about how he now doesn't mind if our children don't go to university and is much more open to that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think there's so much, so much good that you said there. And as someone myself who hasn't been to university, the example of your sister is a great one, because she's now living her life with real purpose and really with real passion, doing something that she genuinely is passionate about. And I truly believe, I really do believe that just putting your energy into things that are meaningful to you, things that resonate with you, no one else. It's not for other people's benefit. There may be a benefit to other people. Hey, they get to watch your dance and they feel good, but you're not doing it for that reason. You're doing it because you enjoy doing it. Then if you just focus on that, I feel like the world will work in a way where if you want to do that as your career, the money will come, right? The income will come. The purpose of doing it, as I said earlier, is not I'm doing this because it's going to earn me the most money. And that's the question I asked myself at that young age. Like, what can I do that's going to earn me the most money the fastest? And that's for some people that makes them tick. But I realized very early on it wasn't what made me tick. So it's great to hear that story about your sister and her doing that work. And of course, it's influenced your view on life. And again, as someone that's gone through university yourself, both you and your husband, just allowing kids to just flourish and nurture themselves. And I feel like, we keep coming back to this society. There is. It's very easy to slip into that mindset because, when you go to school, that's what you're surrounded with. And again, I have hope for the future that it's going to change, that kids are going to learn more about the world. They're going to learn more about how to look after oneself, let alone, how to learn the academics, but how to look after yourself, how to eat well, how to live well, how to manage stress, all of these things that life throws at you. University might be a part of that journey for someone. It may not be, but there's so many. And I think if you look back through history, there'll be so many examples of people like your sister who have gone against the grain, right? They've gone against, no, I'm not going to do what society wants. Maybe we could really even go back to, the civil rights movement, equality in races. Someone had to, sit.
Step away.
Rosa Parks had to sit in a spot in a bus that she wasn't allowed to sit in. Someone had to push that first domino, right? And when you do, and it's or a thread, and you just keep pulling on that thread, you never know what's going to open up for you. Come. So I just and I kind of see it in a very micro, in a nano kind of world with my daughter. In that she's only 4, but. At first, when she was born, I was like, I'm going to get her to do all the things that I love. And and I think parents fall into this trap. It's like, you want to, because you feel like, well, and I ask myself now, am I doing this because I want something from this, or am I doing it because she genuinely wants it? And I remember once when the option of doing football on the Saturday morning came up, and she was like really excited about it. She's like, I really want to do it. I was like, you sure? She's like, yeah, Dad. And then we can play football together, and you like watching football. And I was like, okay. And I was really excited. I was like, cool, this is great. My daughter wants to play football. And she went for a couple of weeks, and she's like, I don't like it anymore. Yeah. I was like, oh. And at first I was like, well, no, you have to go. Of course you have to go. Yeah, and I was disheartened. And I was like, well, why am I disappointed? I was like, well, I'm disappointed because it's something that I would have loved my child to be into because I like it. But if she doesn't like it, then why would I force her to do this? I said, what do you like to do? She goes, love to do ballet. I was like, cool. Well, look, finish the next few weeks, this term, and we'll look at ballet classes. But the point is, and look, this is not to, and some people will say to me, you're spoiling that child, right? I don't want to do this, I want to do that. So it's a fine line. And as a parent, I've had to think about this and think, well, do I put my foot down and say, no, you have to do football because that's what I paid for and that's what I want you to do? Or do I allow them to change their mind and normalize that it is okay to change your mind, and it is okay that you thought you wanted to do something, but you didn't. And again, I've been through that experience in my life with changes in my career, and I've had to have that self-compassion because it didn't come from anywhere else to say, no, if you want to change careers, if you want to move countries, if you want to get married, if you want to do this, then it's okay for you to do those things, no matter what other people are saying.
So you are asking the question about whether letting your children experience different things is actually spoiling them or enriching them. And I would say that you are definitely enriching them. When you are exposing them to different activities, it's not like a toy, which is just materialistic. They're having a whole experience and they're learning skills. So we can't kind of equate that to being spoiled and be like, well, you're just giving your child everything. And also, I think I've been kind of thinking about this in my own life. And a lot of the time we are told, well, if you start something, you need to finish it or see it through. But actually, I think that like trying to apply that, yes, it might apply in some circumstance, but we can't use that like random quote to every situation in our lives. And that's why when you're talking about your daughter, and now actually football is not what she's connecting with anymore, but she's finding something else, that's perfect. But actually, she had to go through the process of trying football to realize it wasn't for her. And that has led her to this new path of thinking, actually, I want to try ballet. I want to try something else. I want to do something physical, but this is actually not fitting with what I enjoy, where my skill set at. So I think that's amazing, and that we should be letting our children do that. But really, we shouldn't stop as children. This is something that we should continue doing every single day of our lives intentionally. We are evolving and dynamic, and we shouldn't kind of pigeonhole ourselves into one place. And once we've decided and we've told the world, oh, this is what I want to do, There's no reason why you can't say, actually, I don't want to do that. I want to do something different, or I want to do something in addition of that. We are multifaceted. We aren't robots that are programmed to do one thing. That works in a society that needs an output, whether that's helping the economy go around or kind of helping a boss somewhere succeed. That kind of mentality is required. But if we want to live in a society where everyone is kind of working to their highest potential, we all need to realize we are multifaceted, and then we can work in different areas to kind of work like that. To just give a very practical example, I'm doing a piece of kind of some teamwork with a colleague at work at the moment. And I enjoy the work that I'm doing, but my values are not aligning with this person I'm working with. Now, I could tell myself, well, if you start something, you need to finish it. Actually, finishing it means that I need to say, I can't continue with this project. I don't need to see the project to the end because I know it's causing me lots of worry, stress. It's not sitting with me right. So the best situation for this project is for me to say, I need to step away and I can't do this. And you'd say the same about a bad relationship. You don't need to see anything till the end. The actual way to see it to the end is say, we're going to stop this right here. And there's beauty in knowing when to walk away. And I think we are scared of doing that. We're worried about, well, what if I actually need that? So it's really important to be able to try something new, but also know when to stop and when it's not working. And it sounds like a failure, but it's not. You're just opening up doors for something else.
You just said something really beautiful there, and you said, there's a beauty in knowing when to walk away, and this is such an important topic. And I was listening to, do you know Stephen Bartlett?
Yes.
I was listening to his audiobook, Happy Sexy Millionaire. I don't know if you heard it, or read his book. But
I haven't read his book
yet. Okay, so in his book, he talks about quitting, and he says how quitting, we've been made to believe by society that quitting is for losers, right? And just as you said, if you start something, you must finish it. And the way he frames it is that quitting is for winners. If you to know when to walk away from something, to quit something that is not serving you, is not moving you forward, that's where the power is. And that kind of comes back to the point you were making earlier about children and the curiosity. I think this is one of the greatest qualities that children have naturally, right? This has not been put into them by any parent, any environment. It just comes naturally, is this curiosity, right? From the moment they are born, they are extremely curious about everything. And I think when they get to an age, like for example, my daughter did, and the football example is a good example of the environment, right? So she's at home, she sees dad's watching football, dad's into football, dad he's talking about football. So kids obviously want to do what their parents do. So I didn't tell her, do you want to play football? She said, oh, I want to do football. I was like, oh, okay, really? Cool. And then, like you said, she figured out it wasn't for her, but she was still curious and says, oh, well, what else would I like to do? And I think that embracing that and just encouraging them to say, look, it's okay to try different things. I mean, gosh, think back and, I tried to learn to play the drums. I tried to learn the piano. I tried to learn the guitar. I did gujarati classes. I did tabla classes. I did all of these different things when I was a child. And of all the things I've just mentioned, I'm not doing any of them now. But it enriched my experience. And I think you touched right at the beginning, you said about experience. And I think that is the key, isn't it? And you think of, even as adults, we think of, what's going to give us the most enriching experience. And you think about, people like to travel, they like to see the world, they like to try different things. And I think that's the same for a child. And yeah, if it's a material thing, if it's, you're buying them iPads and fancy trainers and, we talked about it earlier, the materialistic world, then yeah, there's an element of spoiling there. But of course, if you've got the means to do it, then hey,
that's fine.
That's fine.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. However, I do believe that just allowing them at this age, of course, as long as you're not, I'm not stretching myself financially or, pushing the boat out to try and get her to do these things. So for me, I'm in a fortunate position where I can allow her to try different things. And if she wants to chop and change, then she chops and changes. So yeah, thank you for pointing it out, because I think that curiosity, I feel like we lose it as adults. Yeah, we go through life. We talked about this as well. The kind of the society. You go to university, you get a job. This is what I need to do. This is what's expected of me in life, and we just lose that curiosity. And one thing I think and this is just me talking about myself, is I feel like I've always been very curious, even in my adult life. And that's kind of helped me to get to where I am now, because I've always thought, and I had to walk away from a career. I had to walk away from a very high paying job. And that was difficult. But the reasons I wanted to do it were so powerful and so great that it just was the right thing to do. And if I hadn't been curious about what else can I do, what are my passions and hobbies, what do I really want to do in my life, if I hadn't had that thought process and that curiosity, then I could still be in a job where I was miserable, to be frank. And so I think that's a very important point.
100%. And we should look at children to learn how to be. Because like you said, that's our true being. The true essence of us is what we are as children. I was just on a walk before this recording, and it was a really odd observation I made. And I'm not offending any pet owners here. I don't have any pets, but I used to have a pet, and I'm very respectful of dogs, and they're great companions. But I saw how the dog owner was treating their dog like, oh, my puppy is really excitable, hasn't calmed down yet. And then the other dog owner was like, don't worry, give it some time. It's a really, that age is a really difficult time, but you'll be able to kind of tame them down. Then I saw a mom complaining about their child to another mom as well in the same way. Like, oh, my child is so loud and noisy, just need something to calm them down. I'm like, are we just domesticating our children and our dogs in the same way? Is that what we're doing? But we are, aren't we? We're trying to make it fit into a mode, into kind of a mold that is not, it's one mold for everyone. So we have to just let our children be as free as possible. Because in school, we are told to sit down in a chair and sit there for 6 hours? And we're not made to do that at all. So when kids are not at school, just let them be free. The kid was shouting in a park that they were not disturbing anyone at all. Their voice was kind of disappearing into the air. So it doesn't matter. Let the child just be free and wild. And they will be much more behaved and disciplined if you let them be free, because they will just learn from others and learn through curiosity and find a way of being that fits in to kind of society and fits and works for them. So yeah, some just simple observations from my walk in the park.
For someone that hasn't got children, that's a really great way to look at things, because I remember when I didn't have kids and you would hear a screaming child, wherever it was, right? And your instant thought is, shut your child up, right?
Shut them up.
Yeah, I say my instant thought at the time was like, oh my goodness, shut your child up. And I remember, I'm sure we all were. And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, gosh, if I have a child, I'm never going to let my child behave like that in public. And all these, these are the things that went through my mind. But you're absolutely right. Every child is different. Every child's got its own spirit. I was just talking to I had spent a few days with a friend of mine. They've got a new, a 6-month-old, and she's going through some sleep issues and a phase. And, I'm looking at their experience, and I didn't go through that. We didn't have that same problem. Now, does that mean that his child, there's something wrong with his child? No, that's just the child. During the day, this child is an absolute angel. I mean, 6 months old. Yeah. What harm would a 6-month-old do?
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's a happy baby. Mm-hmm. It's playful. It will go to strangers. It will play with me. It doesn't know me that well, but it will still play with me. And at nighttime, something just happens to that child, and it's not happy, right? Every child's different, right? And yes, the children need to play. Children need to express themselves, and that's why kids, they're just burning off energy, right? Kids love running around. They love climbing on things. They've got all of this energy to burn, and I think we need to encourage that as much as possible in the early years.
Stimulate them, and they can use that energy in a good way. Kind of make them use their brains, give them what they need to. Again, you don't need to get expensive toys. My mom, this is what we used to play with. She used to be cooking dinner, and she used to put all the pots and pans on the kitchen floor, and that's what we used to play with. Literally just banging them together. That what used to be our toys. They'd buy us all the toys. We wouldn't play with that. We'd play with the fun stuff, because we used to look at mom and be like, I want to do what mom's doing, but do it on the floor, on the kitchen floor. So it doesn't take much. We just have to engage them in other ways. Again, I don't have children, so I'm able to take how I think right now into that time when I do have children, because I can understand it's so stressful, it's overwhelming, and sometimes you just need the child to be quiet, for some peace and quiet. So I'm speaking from a very naive standpoint, so we can kind of catch up again when I do have children.
I was going to say, you can listen back to this exact recording
as a reminder.
Or if I'm still in touch with you, I'll remind you, say, hey, remember what you said? And I think you just to touch on something else you mentioned there, which I think is such an important point, and I've mentioned this before in this podcast, is children do play, but you're absolutely right. They get to 4, 5 years old, and it's sit down, be quiet, don't move. And it's like that from the age of 5 to 18, yeah, and then you go to university and it's a little bit different. And that period of their life is such a crucial, that 10 years of their lives, 10, 12 years of their lives, it's really the forming years of their lives. So if they have to be disciplined at school, which is fine, I get schools have to work a certain way, and I'm not blaming the schools at all. It's just the system needs to change. However, they need to have that expression of just expressing themselves outside of school. And I think this is something which, some people grow up in an environment where they go to school and they come home and it's the same thing. Parents can be very strict with homework, and home is almost an extension of school, and that's fine. I get it. I get parents have a responsibility to make sure their kids are doing well, but there has to be an element of that child discovering who they are, because they might get I've known people like this where they get to 16, 17, 18. And they're so drilled in the academics that they don't actually know who they are. They don't have any, real passions or hobbies. It's almost their whole world narrative is based on academics and education. And, that's not really going to see that child in a good way when they are living independently, trying to live their life, have a family, do all these different things. So I think, that element of play is so important. Talking of play, let's talk to the opposite of play, which is work. So I want to just touch on the work, because we've spoken all this time. We haven't really spoken about the work that you're doing now. So your professional job. So you are a psychiatrist. And I think the first question a lot of people have when they hear the term psychiatry is, how does that differ from psychology? Because the two are often used interchangeably. So could you maybe just give us a quick overview? What is the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist?
Yeah, I think the best place to start is our training. So our training is totally different. To become a psychologist, a clinical psychologist, you need to do a degree in psychology, and then you need to do another degree after that, which is actually really tough to get onto. They only have like a select number of places in the UK to become a clinical psychologist. So that's another 3 years. There's a lot of kind of work goes into it, and you have to do lots of research work during that time. And then you will become a clinical psychologist at the end of it. For psychiatry, you have to do medicine, so a 5 or 6 year degree. You do your foundation year 1 and 2, which I spoke about. And then at that point, you decide, okay, what specialty do you want to do? Do I want to be a GP? Do I want to be a surgeon? And psychiatry is one of the subspecialties you can go into. And then that's a whole 6 year program to become a consultant psychiatrist. So within that program, I am 4 years in, and I've got 2 years left till I become a consultant. Now, the roles are different as well. So what a psychiatrist, they both work closely together in a mental health team. A psychiatrist will generally, but kind of these roles are kind of merging as we speak and in the future, but a psychiatrist will generally see the patient and give the diagnosis by taking a full history. So that history taking will take about an hour. And it's a little bit like what we've been doing, talking about my life, what I've been through, how have I ended up where I am right now. But obviously the people that I'm speaking to have been through some difficult circumstances, more lows than highs that have led them to have a mental illness. So we talk about that. Then I kind of match up their symptoms and put a diagnosis on. And then based on the diagnosis, I decide on what therapy they need. So that could be medication, and I'm the one that will just prescribe that medication. I will decide if they're ready for psychological therapy, so that's talking therapy, and then see what social support they need as well. So we take a very holistic view in psychiatry. So the arm of treatment of talking therapies, that is delivered by the psychologist. So they will see the patient and they will treat them. So they will decide what type of therapy they need. So whether they need cognitive behavioral therapy, whether they need dialectical behavior therapy, and there's loads of different therapy types. So they can carry out that therapy. So we work very closely. Psychologists deliver one arm of the treatment. Psychiatrists generally take an overview and see, okay, where are you at? What do we need to do with medication? They'll be the ones that prescribe the medication, do the diagnosis, review the patient. And then in different teams, psychiatrists will tend to be kind of the team leader and lead the whole team, bring it together, and do kind of leadership and management roles as well. So that's kind of a very quick snapshot of how our roles differ. But they both help people get better from the mental health difficulties, but just using different approaches.
So a psychologist isn't a doctor. doesn't have the title doc.
So they still have doctor.
They still have the title.
Their name,
right?
But they're not a medical doctor.
Okay.
So that's the difference there.
I see. Yeah. Okay, all right, that makes sense. So what types of I don't know what the right word is. What's the types of conditions, illnesses, I guess, that's probably a general. What kind of things do people come to a psychiatrist with? What are the things that you see on a day-to-day basis?
So the way that it works in the NHS, if we think about like the patient journey, there are lots of places where you can get mental health help. Now, the majority is dealt by the GP. So if someone came in with, and I'm putting inverted commas, uncomplicated or mild depression and anxiety, they would go to their GP. And the GP does most of the mental health care. So they will prescribe antidepressants, refer them to a therapist to have some low-level psychological input, and manage them in the community and see how much help they need. Now, if there is a patient that they have high risk. So let's say that someone comes to the GP and they are talking about their suicidal thoughts, self-harming, or presenting in a complicated way, then they will be referred to the psychiatrist. So it's a bit like if you've got diabetes, you will see your GP and the GP will think about diet, exercise, start you on some metformin. But actually, if it gets to a point where you need some specialist help, you'll be referred to the diabetes team and you'll see a diabetologist. So it's a doctor that specializes in diabetes. So it's similar like that. So the things that are a little bit more complex and psychiatrists look after would be conditions like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. So we see all schizophrenia patients because they need kind of input right from the beginning to get them on medication quickly, prevent relapses. We see depression that doesn't get better with kind of like 2 antidepressants or a combination of antidepressants. We see patients that are high risk, so when there's self-harm and suicide and things like that. And there's lots of different types of psychiatrists. So I'm a trainee in general adult psychiatry. So I will see anyone between the age of 18 and 65 and whatever they present with. So that will be everything: PTSD, anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, bipolar affective disorder, personality disorders. So all of that I will see. Then you have learning disability psychiatrists, so they will see anyone with a learning disability, forensic psychiatry, there is old age psychiatry, child and adolescent psychiatry, and another area called medical psychotherapy. So they do similar to what psychologists do, but they are qualified doctors. So just another way of getting psychological therapy. So there's lots of different types of psychiatrists, and depending on what you're presented with, that's how you will be seen by psychiatrists. Then we kind of work with you. I generally see my patients at intervals of 2 to 3 months, start them on medication, see how they're doing, see if they're ready for therapy, because it's never that sometimes I'm a strong believer that medication alone cannot help things. They might kickstart things, but generally need therapy or to work through some kind of things, especially if you're seeing me. It tells me that there's something more complex going on. There's usually trauma at the source of why this has started. So I generally try to start talking about therapy and get the patients ready to engage in therapy. So that's really where I work. And we work in inpatient settings, so mental health hospitals where we have a ward and patients are admitted, and then also outpatient basis, so a clinic setting. Just depends on the level of risk that the patient is presenting with and where they need to be looked after. Similar to physical health, you can see your GP, but actually, if you have a serious infection, you need to be in hospital and be treated by a team there. So that's like a general overview of how it works.
Thank you for that. That's really, really informative. So, I mean, one of the things that I wanted to ask you is that in terms of the treatment, is there any component where you are talking about lifestyle changes as well as the medication and the therapy? And again, this may be something that might be shifting now, or there might be a potential shift, but what's the status on it? Do you look at other lifestyle factors to help people with their treatment?
Yeah, I definitely do. And I kind of learned from my experience. So I'm like, actually, walking is helping me, having a better diet is helping me. And then I'm listening to so many podcasts. It's so easy for me to learn all that knowledge, all the studies that are happening, rather than having to look at a paper and read it and understand it. I can now listen to podcasts, researchers directly talking to me, telling about the benefits of using things like diet and exercise, meditation, mindfulness, all these things. So I very much try to incorporate that into my care. That's not everyone, because they almost think that actually if someone is unwell enough to see a psychiatrist, they possibly couldn't do any of these things. Whereas I see it as the foundation. This isn't, I don't see, if I see a psychotic patient, I'm obviously not going to tell them to do mindfulness, but what I can tell them to do is let's start improving your diet. Let's start getting you walking when things are getting better. That can be part of their therapy. When they're on the ward, I can tell them, okay, let's go to the courtyard and let's just have a little walk around, because that's not going to make them feel worse in any way. If they are able to mobilize, it's only going to make things better. So I am kind of a strong advocate of doing that. I will use my own experiences to try to encourage patients to do things. So be like, you know what, I actually found that really hard. And I do find it really hard to incorporate exercise into my daily routine because I'm doing lots of virtual appointments and sitting at my desk. So I tell them, I've had a struggle, but this is how I've started. You might want to try it like this. And then at my next appointment, let me know how you've got on. I'll update you on how I'm getting on with it as well. So I try to do a lot more of that. If you speak to other psychiatrists, they might not be doing that because we are not taught about this directly in our curriculum. It's slowly getting there. And there are loads of psychiatrists that are practicing like this, but it's generally quite a new field, like you said. But I do hope that it's the direction we go in and it becomes a larger component of what we do. I believe that every team should have one person that's in charge of promoting lifestyle medicine so that I can tell my patient, okay, look, we've talked about a few things, but I actually need you to see, I don't know, Sharon, who's going to spend some more time with you, put a plan in place, and they can continue motivating you. Because I can tell the patient something, but I'm going to see them every 2 months, and that's not enough to keep them going. It's like I kind of slip it, and I usually kind of slip it in at the end of my thing. It's not going to be the focus of my appointment. They're coming to see me for medication. So if I speak about walking for the whole appointment, they're really going to feel like they didn't get the best service from me. So I try to sneak it in there, but it is a balance because patients expect something of me. The service expects something of me. So I really think it is something that's coming into play more.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bottom line for me is I don't believe that there's a human being alive that's not going to benefit from eating better food, from doing a bit more movement, from being aware of stress and finding ways to manage it, to improving their sleep, improving their connections and their the love in their life, happiness. There's not a human being alive that's not going to benefit from those things. So I think the medical system, and it's happening. Like, we know there's a shift happening. We've got BSLM and people who are promoting lifestyle medicine. There's Nutritank who are bringing it into the doctors' curriculum as well. So this shift is happening, and I just think, because this is all I do on a day-to-day basis when it comes to diabetes patients, it's really, and it's just, and I know this because the patients I speak with, they say, oh, I got my family doing, even though they're not diabetic, I got them doing the things that you asked me to do, and it's improved their whatever it might be. And so, this idea of this holistic, this lifestyle approach, I think is beneficial for everyone. So I'm hopeful. I do see a point in the future where all medical disciplines, the basis and the foundation of everything is going to be lifestyle. It's going to be all the things that we've just spoken about. So it's great. And do you know what? I think it needs people like you. It needs people who are, who maybe haven't been taught this way, but are taking this on board themselves, are educating themselves, are, listening to the evidence and using it in a clinical setting and seeing the benefit. Because I think once you start to get those results with your patients, then that's when people will start to take notice. Oh, okay, this stuff does work. I've said this before, someone's got to push the first domino. So I think being that person and being involved in that movement is fantastic. So yeah, great work on that. I think that's something that we all need going forward. And another thing I wanted to touch on when it comes to psychiatry and mental health is this stigma. And I think I spoke about this with Charlotte, the lifestyle psychiatrist. Charlotte. And, there's this, certainly when I was growing up as a kid, there was this huge stigma with, you just said mental hospital, right? That phrase, I remember my mum used to threaten me, right? I'll take you to the mental hospital, right? And I'd just be like, what's at the mental hospital? And you just get this image, and it's TV, it's media, it's movies, where these people in straitjackets and, banging their heads are going to, and I'm sure that does exist. But when we talk about mental health in 2022, it's not about that. And I think we need to try and overcome that stigma. And I know that in the world that we live in, and I mean, you and I, we surround us, we listen to podcasts about these things. We follow people on Instagram. Our world, mental health is just, it's normal, right? It's everyone suffers from mental ill health, I should say. Some people suffer from mental health in all different ways, shapes or form. Everybody, from celebrities to the Queen to the person on the street. But you go outside of that, outside of that bubble that we live in, I feel like the majority of people still have this stigma with mental ill health. And I know this because when we talk about it on our program, in the diabetes prevention program, you do see people think, no, that, I'm not.
I'm about that.
Yeah.
I'm not here for that.
Yeah, don't mean to offend anyone, but I'm not mental. That's the comment I've had. And so I just feel like there just needs to be a little bit more done to increase the awareness. And I know the NHS are doing really good work in the background trying to promote this. But yeah, do you still feel there's as someone who's under 30 who's kind of coming up in the world, do you feel there's still that stigma around mental ill health?
Massive. And it's really funny that you bring this up, because I was literally having this conversation with my husband at breakfast today, and I was like angry and frustrated in that discussion, because I just said, well, the truth is, and it's not even just the Asian community, that stigma is everywhere, whether you're white, black, Caucasian, Asian, whatever you are, there is that stigma around mental health. So as a society, we stigmatize mental health, people with mental health conditions, people that work in mental health hospitals, all of that. So that really needs to change. And the change, yes, it can come from the NHS, but it has to really come from us. So we have to start talking about it in the most open way. And it also, so to create like a safe space that if people are suffering mental illness, that they can speak about it and feel safe speaking about it. And it is so much more easier for me to say this because I have not been through a severe mental illness. For people that experience psychosis, it's a frightening thing to see, to actually go through it. I cannot even begin to imagine what it's like. I can't even begin to imagine what it's like to be a relative of someone that has had a psychotic episode. But what I do know, and because I see all these patients, is that there is so many of them. And that person thinks that they're alone because their stigma stops them from speaking about it. So what we've got is, let's say we've got a community of, 400 people. Now, 1% of people have a psychotic episode. So 4 of them in there will feel really lonely. Now, 4 of them could come together and talk about their experiences. Let's say each person has 10 people in their support system. That would mean that there's 44 people out of that 100 that could come together and talk about their experiences. That's just under half. And that's how we overcome stigma, that we start talking about these experiences, because then that person, that 1%, that 1 in 100 does not feel alone anymore. And it has to start with us. And it is hard to put that responsibility on the person that has been through the illness and the relatives of the person that has been through the illness. But we are just propagating the problem if we are being quiet about it. And I don't know how we give courage and bravery to these people to start speaking about their experiences. And that's actually one of the main reasons I started the podcast. I wanted it to be a place where people can come and speak about their experiences. Many of them would have been through the hardest part, and now they are on the recovery side, so they feel a bit better about talking about it. But I really want people to start having that conversation, hear it, and remember, and it sounds cliche, but that you're not alone, because you can literally feel like, oh my God, no one in the world has gone through this, such an awful situation. How can this happen to us? We're a stable family with a good income. This only happens to people from that socio-demographic kind of background. No, it doesn't. I know so many Gujaratis that have had a psychotic episode, because I get people in my DMs asking me, my mum's going through this, my dad's going through this, my brother's going through this, can you kind of signpost me to some advice? And I send them lots of resources to read to educate them. But they're still suffering in silence, and everyone thinks, oh, it's just me. No, it's not. There's so many people that are going through this. So it really needs to start with each individual trying to reduce the stigma.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. And you mentioned the podcast, and you mentioned just talking about it. I think the more people hear people talk about it, and you're right, people, it is lonely. It does feel like it's just you. It's like nobody else is going through this. And I think when you start to hear, and again, just relating it to something completely different, which is the work I do on the diabetes prevention program, someone hears in session 1, we always talk about pre-diabetes and what did you think were the first time you heard that word or you were told, and people tell their stories, and there's always aha moments around the room, because I can see people going, oh yeah, I thought the same thing, gosh, it's not just me. And I think that's the power of the group, I think, and that this is just a sidetrack. But when they hear their peers talking about it, people who look like them, who, maybe have the same level of income as them, on the same socioeconomic, scale as them, then they start to think, oh, or like you said, they see people at all different levels of society, and they think, oh wow, there's it can
happen to him.
Yeah, it can happen to him. Happen to and I talk about it from my experience with it as well. The experience I had when I was in my previous career, just to say, look, we all go through this, and it's okay, right? And I love the phrase, it's okay not to be okay. And it's all part of this shared human experience, because we all go through this. And I think and you're doing the right thing, creating that awareness. The podcast, which I want to talk about next, these are the ways that we're going to help people to normalize it and to not make it so trivial, and just treat it like any other condition. People, and I'll look back to my time in the corporate world. People will happily call up their employer when they've got a cough or a cold or a flu, or, oh, I'm not well. But what about when they're not feeling mentally stable and they're not feeling, right in the head? The first thing comes, they don't know what it is, right? It's like, I don't know why I'm feeling this way. I feel like crap. I don't want to go to work. And then then that's when the lies start. That's when all the hiding starts. Oh, well, I've got this wrong with me. I've got this wrong with me. And you just go down this wormhole of, it's almost like you're trying to hide that there's something wrong. And I think that just needs to be normalized, that, someone calling up an employer and saying, look, hey, I'm not feeling great today. I just need to stay at home, for whatever reason. That should be okay. And I think not only do the medical profession and the medical side of it, but, the employers and the corporate world. And I'm quite fortunate in the company that I work with. They're very, very good at this. You mentioned safe spaces. We have safe spaces where people can come to talk, and we have little these Zoom calls every so often where people can just come and share their experiences, and just normalizing it, which I think is so important. And the last point I want to touch on is within, you mentioned the Gujarati and the Indian community. I think there's a huge amount of stigma around, lots of different illnesses, but particularly mental ill health. And I think something that we talked about this, right? The trauma that our parents' generation would have had to go through, being kicked out of their country and coming over here and, trying to make a living and, trying to find somewhere to live and all of these things, learning a new language. I mean, it's going to have an impact on you, right? It's going to affect the way that you think. And, it may not manifest itself in the moment like all those years ago, but 20, 30, 40 years later, you start to see it, and I'm seeing, unfortunately, I'm seeing some of that with my father, which is sort of what's happening to him now, and that I truly believe that comes from what happened, many years ago. So I think trying to normalize it within that community is something that really, really needs to happen.
Yeah, it catches up with you. It always will.
Yeah,
you don't wake up one day and you've got depression. I always tell my patients, okay, I'm giving you medication, but I need you to understand this is not going to be the magic pill, because what you're experiencing right now has been in the making for the last 20 years. And we've got to a point where I can actually see it now, and it's impacting your day-to-day life, but it's always been there. So we need to take years to undo it, reprocess all that trauma, go through things and get you back to where you were. But this is not something that just comes out of the blue. It's not just a chemical imbalance. When we reduce it to a chemical imbalance, you can't do justice to the illness. You'll become stable for a while, then you'll relapse, and it'll just continue.
It's like any disease, any condition, right? It's getting to the root cause, right? So chemical imbalances, yes, you can address them with chemicals, right? With pharmaceuticals, right? You can address any chemical balance. You can bring someone's blood glucose back under control with metformin. But if you don't get to the root cause of what's creating that insulin resistance or whatever the imbalance is in the first place, whether it's a trauma or PTSD or whatever that might be, if we don't get to that root cause, all you're doing is putting a Band-Aid on it. And I think that's something that is shifting within the medical system. It's not just about diagnosis. Oh, this looks like that. Okay, have this, and off you go. There needs to be that extended care, which I know is happening. So yeah, that's a very, very good point there. Let's talk about your podcast. You said earlier on about you're kind of at this stage of your career. You and your husband, where you're trying to figure yourselves out. You're approaching 30. What does this next step look like? I mean, you may not know, and that's again a very, very kind of out there question. But you're doing the podcast, so tell us a bit about that, and then maybe that can lead on to other things that you're up to at the moment.
Yeah. So I started thinking about this podcast in about August. I think we'd have been on a holiday, and that's generally when we get to pause, do a lot of reflecting. We do a lot of reflecting. We think, oh, we want to do this. But when we get back to our busy lives, it sometimes doesn't materialize into anything because you just get so caught up. You haven't got that time to just sit back and think. So that's very much what happened with the podcast. I had the idea and it came from the place of, do you know what? There's so many stories that I want to share. Like, I want to share all the stories that I hear in my clinic. Obviously, I can't do that because of confidentiality reasons. So I thought I want to share these elsewhere on a platform that people can just tap into it. And I wanted to join up the conversation. So we talk about mental illness. There'll be podcasts that just speak about mental illness. Then there'll be podcasts that talk about personal development. But I really wanted to make that one conversation because it really is. We are always moving on a spectrum and at different points in our life from a place of human flourishing, or we might be experiencing severe mental illness. And most of us kind of sit in the middle somewhere. There'll be a small percentage that are at severe mental illness stage, but we are constantly moving. It's not like once you have kind of like a severe episode of depression, you are just in that range. You recover and you get a bit better, and you might come towards human flourishing. You might not quite reach there, or you might get there because that experience would have given you that kind of experience to grow from it. So I really wanted to bring these two conversations together. So I wanted a variety of people that have been through the mental health system and others who have been through difficulties but found other ways to get to human flourishing. So I thought, well, I'll just start with my friends and family so that I have at least kind of some material to go by. And actually I had such a good response. I had loads of people reaching out and saying, can I share my story? And they are so brave and courageous for doing that. And I'm so thankful for them because really the podcast wouldn't be anything without them. It's very much them talking and me guiding the conversation. And they're all conversations about some people that have been through some really difficult times, been through mental illness themselves and come out the other side and what they've learned from it. And I hope people can listen to it and see what recovery looks like. And just, again, going back to that whole thing, we are just moving across the spectrum. It's not you have mental illness, you don't have mental illness. It's not like that. It's gradual, and we can slip somewhere, we can slip down that curve, we can go up. And most of us are probably not at the point of human flourishing, and that's where I want to get them to. And I really want that for my patients every day in my clinic. But I don't have I'm not allowed to continue seeing them if they're not presenting with mental symptoms. So I have to kind of discharge them as soon as there's recovery. So I can never get them to the stage that I want to. So I use this podcast as kind of like where I can feel a bit satisfied. It's an add-on kind of therapy, I guess. So they can listen to it and see, okay, well, I'm free of mental illness, but how do I now move to this next stage of getting the most out of life? Because it's not, well-being isn't just the absence of symptoms. It's about flourishing and getting the most out of your life. So that's where the kind of podcast came from. So I've been doing that, and I've been like on and off Instagram as I feel like it, not very consistent with it. But then me and my husband were very much thinking over the Christmas holidays and that time leading up to it. We were like, okay, well, we've done lots of reflecting and we know we want to get something more out of life. How do we kind of actually stick to that rather than just thinking about it on holiday, coming back, not doing anything about it, and then on the next holiday doing the same process and being there? We could continuously just be there like every year on year. So we thought, okay, what can we do? So we started doing lots of reflecting and then putting like plans in place, reflecting on the plan, actioning it, and doing that on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. And I was like, this is actually really good. And I'm sure my friends would find this useful. I'm sure my family would find this useful. So I thought, okay, I took the leap. I was like, Raj, shall we make this into a workshop? Shall we just do a workshop? And he was like, yeah. I was like, okay, instead of just doing a one-off workshop, shall we make this into a membership program where people can come and then they can be part of a group which lasts, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, because that's what we needed. That's what kept us going. It wasn't just a one-off brainstorming session. We needed accountability. We needed each other's support. We wanted to reflect and evaluate. And he was like, yeah, that sounds good. So he's at the point where in 6 months' time, he's going to finish his GP training and he's looking at where he wants to go. And he is pretty much saying goodbye to GP. He might pick up a few shifts here or there, but he is starting from we're not going to say starting from scratch. He is finding another route with the skills and experience he's got. So I thought, okay, well, this could be one of the things you do. Again, I'm making it very clear it's one of the things. It's not going to be his one and only, because I don't want to pigeonhole him into one place. I don't want him to feel that he needs to just do this one thing. So in January, we just decided we're going to go for it. We put together all we've been working on, formed it into a workshop, registered a company, put together a website, and decided on a date we're going to do our workshop, which is in a week's time, 6th of March. This will probably be released after that. And at that point, we're going to release our program and we're going to see what comes of it. And like you said, it's very much a passion project. This is what's really kind of giving us passion every day and getting us really excited. And it's a way that I can fulfill myself. I'm helping people in my clinic with severe mental illness, but this is how I can help and support people that are living their everyday lives, but not getting to the point of human flourishing. And that's what really on. So I get to work across the whole spectrum with what I do in my 9 to 5 and then what I'm doing outside of my 9 to 5 as well. So that's where we're at the moment.
Amazing. I think it's a great passion project. It's a great, and we say passion project, but this is just something that you are that fulfills you, that makes you want to get up in the morning, that makes you want to go out and engage with people, and you're still there's still the common denominators of working with people. It's still the common denominator of helping people. Is still putting positive information out there. So I think that's amazing. You talk about human flourishing. I just want to touch on that. It's a really, really fascinating phrase. What does that mean? What does that look like? What is the human, what's the flourished human look like in your eyes?
In my eyes, it's being able to find your purpose for that kind of time in your life, and then your actions being in line with that purpose and with your intentions, whatever they are. But that doesn't stay static. It's always dynamic and evolving. So it's not like I decide today what my purpose is and I do that for the next 5 years. I might have an overall vague purpose, but I have lots of other kind of projects coming off it, and then lots of actions which come of that. So it's like a huge mind map, and I'm constantly re-looking at that mind map and seeing, okay, how can I share all the qualities I have with society? And that's how I see yourself as human flourishing, because the way that you can flourish is share all your experience and expertise with others. Because if we all did that in society, our society would be so full. It really would be, because we all have so much talent to give to the world. If we think about how much of our talents we're using at the moment, we're probably using about 10%, 20%. So that's what I see as human flourishing. And through the program, we do that. We do some stuff on purpose, finding your purpose, and then actually how does purpose turn into action? And it's very much how I'm leading my life. And that doesn't focus on, I know what the end point is. I have no idea what the end point is. But if I concentrate on that, I'm limiting myself, because I'm saying this is what I'm going to do. But by just starting the project, there could be lots of things that come up, lots of connections I make, networking I do, and I will be creative. So next week I might think, actually, we need to add this onto the program. We need to have guest speakers coming in to make it a better program. I don't know where it's going to turn, but I'm not limiting myself, because then I'm just going to go down the same track. I'll be literally doing what I've done in the last 10 years, but doing it to myself rather than someone else doing it to me. So I'm not looking at what the end point is. I am allowing myself to be evolving and dynamic and see where it leads me. And that's the best way to be ambitious, I feel. Rather than setting yourself a goal, just saying, I am going to share all the qualities I have of myself the best way possible with society.
I love that. And I think you talk about goals, and the endpoints. I think the problem with goals is that they're outcome based. It's like, I need to get to this outcome. I need to earn this much money. I need to get this many followers. I need to lose weight. Well, what happens when you get there? Right? You talk about the destination. It's like, when you get to the destination, I'll tell you what, in my experience, it's often an anticlimax, right? Whereas what you're saying is living in the moment, enjoying what you're doing. And you said it about passions, your purpose, this word purpose, it's confusing, because people feel like, I don't know what my purpose is. And I'm taking this from Stephen Bartlett, who says it very, very differently than I do, but he's quite passionate about it, in that, your purpose is going to evolve. It's going to change depending on the stage of your life. And that's okay, right? Let's go back to, we talked about my daughter. She likes playing with water or whatever she's doing. She might not be doing that in 20 years' time, but she's really passionate about it right now. That doesn't mean that's all she's going to do for the rest of her life. Your husband's another great example. You know, we talked about the power of walking away. I mean, he's walking away from being a GP. So people listening to this thinking, what is wrong with the guy?
Why are you doing that?
Why are you doing that? You're a GP, but he knows it's not serving him. It's not moving him forward. And the power of him walking away is absolutely going to repay him. The universe will conspire to help you to do the things that you want to do. You know, if you said to me back in 2010, when I decided to quit my job and become a personal trainer, that in 2022, I'm going to be sitting here with 4 cameras around me recording a podcast, about to do my 50th episode, I'd be like, no, don't be silly. I'm not going to be a podcaster. But you know, you don't know. And this is the same with me. I don't know what the destination is. And I don't really care at this point, right? And I have a vague trajectory. I have a vague kind of, you know, my values direct me towards a particular way, but where that goes, you know, it's open. It's completely open. And I think people who are trying to find their purpose, I think what they have to realize is that it's not one fixed thing, right? And I think when you try to, and this is the problem with society, isn't it? There's full stops. There's like
boxes you have to fit
boxes.
in.
Yeah, you get a degree, you do this, and you know, that I just don't feel that our life's purpose is that way. And you know, anyone who, and I've spoken to many people like this, whose purpose and trajectory of life has changed in the last 3 years. I mean, whose hasn't, right? If we look pre-COVID to what people were doing, the way they were thinking, the way they were living their lives, and you maybe look at those people now, there's so many people who have just completely gone a different way, or taken a turn here, or maybe quit something that they felt wasn't serving them. So I think I love the way that you talk about that, and I think that can be helpful for a lot of people, because there are going to be a lot of people, you know, who are in a very similar stage of life that you and your husband are at, who, you know, are professionals, who are, you know, are fitting in that box at the moment, and then just thinking, no, there's got to be more. And I think just helping those people to give them a process, give them a way of discovering what's next, and you know, how they can live their life so that they are doing things that are meaningful and fulfilling. And you know, I truly believe that when people give back, that's the first thing you mentioned, you know, giving back and putting yourself out there. I think when you're giving back to the world, and you're giving back to the community, and you are doing something that really enlightens you and, you know, makes you want to get up in the morning, everything else takes care of itself, right? Money, fame, power, all of these other things which are outcomes. Oh, I want money, I want fame, I want power. Well, I think those are just side effects, right? They are side effects of living a fulfilling life, and those things will come. And, you know, I think that's the way I try to look at them, because again, I've gone through that myself. I put myself into a career which was completely different to what I was doing before, and I didn't think, well, I need to earn this much money. I just thought I need to be the best at this that I can, because that's what I want to. That's what really drives me every day to get up. And by doing that, you know, those other things came, and you know, and when I say they came, am I retired and I don't need to work ever again? No, but it came so that I could continue to do what I'm doing, and that's led me to where I am today. So I think that's wonderful, the way that you frame that. Gosh, we've been speaking for so long. There's so much more that I want to speak about, but I'm gonna just park it there, and hopefully we can do a part two 100%. One day. Where can people find out a bit more about what you're up to, Devika? How can they get in touch? Give us some information.
Yeah, so I have my Instagram, which is at Dr. Devika Patel. And then there's also the website, which has most of our stuff on it now, which is www.drdevikaandrajiv.com. So that's both mine and my husband's kind of venture and the community that we're building. At the moment, it's just the membership program that we'll be releasing. It's going to have lots of blogs on there coming up soon as well, because again, with what I've intentionally done with the website is I haven't made it one specific niche. I've left it open so that we can use that platform to discover our different interests. So one of my interests right now is cooking. So there's going to be a large part of cooking blogs on there and videos, and that might turn into a cooking course with my mom. I don't know where it's going to go, but again, leaving it very open. My husband's very much into traveling. So that's going to form lots of traveling blogs and see how that kind of turns into what he likes to do. So there'll be lots of stuff, loads of updates. It will continue to evolve as me and my husband do. So it's a good place to just get signed up to the newsletter so we can keep you updated with what's going on. And there'll be loads and loads of free stuff on there, because I truly believe that you don't have to pay for these things. So we'll be giving our most valuable stuff free. And then if you need that extra support, you want to be part of the community, then you can pay that bit extra and be part of it as well.
Love it. So thank you for that. I'll make sure that I link in all those websites and your Instagram on the episode description and show notes. We need more reels. From when's the next reel coming?
I told my husband, I was like, I'm planning the reels today. We will record them tomorrow, and he didn't look too impressed, but he was quite easily persuaded. So
you got him up. You got him up on one occasion. So that's the first step.
First step.
Yeah, that's the dipping the toe. Devika, thank you so much. Go and check out Devika's Instagram. Go and check out the website. Go and show us some love. I think it's fantastic what you're doing, and just looking forward to seeing you grow and talking again in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me here.